across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good afternoon. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. It's just gone 1 o'clock and there is loads to talk about between now and 4 o'clock. Matt Lucas, the comedy actor who was verbally abused, we'll talk about him, about his views on Palestine. Not that we actually know what they are because he's never really said anything. He just happens to be Jewish, and this kind of verbal attack happened over the weekend. I've had it myself. I'm obviously much less high profile than him, but it does happen when you put your views in public. We'll talk about the 70 migrants who came across in small boats, had their mobile phones taken away from them, and then what happened? Well, they sued, and then what happened? They got £6,500 each of your money. £500,000 of taxpayers' money has been given to people who came across in small boats and had their phones taken off them. Yes, that is what has happened. We'll talk about Marco Rubio as well, an incredible speech over the weekend talking about the future of this country, Europe and America, and that relationship. We'll hear a few things from him. We'll also talk about the much neglected story of Iran and the pro-Iranian protest that happened in London, across the country, and in Munich at the security conference. I wonder why a lot of the media didn't report them, and certainly didn't report them at the time. 250,000 people in Munich saying what is happening in Iran at the moment is all our concern, because what's happening there, what pro-Islamists are doing elsewhere, well, it's coming to this country. It's here already. We'll talk about Starmer under fire over a pro-Labour group's smears against journalists, a whole report done against two Sunday Times journalists, and Reform opening the door to a possible election pact with the Conservatives. What do you make of that? Loads to discuss here on Talk between now and 4 o'clock. I'm filling in for Ian Collins today, tomorrow and Wednesday. I'd love to hear from you. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call to get your voice on the air. You can text me 87222 with the word Talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note, less than a minute please, to 0344 499 1000. Same number for calls, same number for WhatsApp text messages. Whatever you want to say, however you want to say it, you're welcome here on Talk. We're the home of common sense, and we're going to hear plenty of that over the next 3 hours, so stay with us. Well, over the weekend, there was some really disturbing footage online of Matt Lucas, who is the comedy actor. Of course, he's best known for Little Britain, but I actually see him around this building from time to time because he does a podcast for Talk Sport, our sister station, and he's a very nice chap. He's a very good comedian. He's a very good performer. He knows a lot about sport as well, which I certainly don't. But he happens to be Jewish. Now, to my knowledge, I have never heard Matt Lucas say anything about the Middle East, about Gaza, about the humanitarian situation for Israelis and for Palestinians, about the war. I'm pretty sure I've never read or heard him say anything, but he's Jewish. He was on the tube in London over the weekend. This is what happened.
Free Palestine. Free Palestine, Matt Lucas. Free Palestine.
Hi, how are you?
You don't like the suit what I'm wearing, do you?
Sorry?
You don't like what I'm wearing?
No, I have no comment about it either way.
Palestinians. You've got a problem with Palestinians, man?
No.
Please don't. You can't do that. You can't grab my stuff.
So Matt Lucas on an escalator in a station in London, and guess what happens? He gets harassed for being Jewish. Don't you care about Palestinians? Well, he hasn't said anything. He's just going about his daily business. He's just doing what ordinary people do. This happened to me as well. I was actually getting off again at a tube station in my part of London, and a man came up to me actually at a just coming up to the lights, going across the road to where I live, and started shouting at me about my views on Israel. And Jewish people are being harassed so much. There's so much anti-Semitism in our society that we know that this has happened to Matt Lucas, it's happening to various people. Julia mentioned how it happened to her. And of course we have the news from Brighton as well about doors being knocked and people being told to boycott Israeli produce. Now, if you're Jewish, how does that make you feel? let's have a chat with Ian in London. He's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Ian, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. I'd like to just say you, bless you, and Julia are fantastic, and the rest of the people, too many to mention at Talk.
Well, thank you. There are a lot of people braver than us, a lot of people out there on the streets, activists, people saying and doing things that we don't do, and it's absolutely fine to say it from a nice warm studio, but when you're out there and when you see what happened to Matt Lucas, who as far as I know, has never said anything about the Middle East publicly.
No, he just keeps himself to himself, doesn't say too much, right? But the one that I feel really I'd love to know what goes on behind closed doors is Starmer with his wife. Now, quite simply, can you imagine that if his wife lived in Brighton or in Sheffield, and I wouldn't be surprised it will happen in places like Bristol soon, that she was at home and they started knocking on her door?
Well, it has happened in Bristol. It has happened in Bristol. There have been these boycott, these people who want, as they put it, apartheid-free zones. There have been these different occasions where people knock on doors. And Carla Denyer, who is the leader of the co-leader of the Green Party, I think, or was anyway, she's a Green MP. I asked her on my programmes of the weekend. She wasn't available. She has said that this is something that she thinks should continue. If you're a Jewish person, someone knocks your door and says you should be boycotting Israeli produce. My question to those people is really straightforward. Do you have an iPhone? And if you have an iPhone, are you going to stop using it? Because there's Israeli technology in that. There are incredible leaps that have been made in chemotherapy. A form of chemotherapy is being developed in Israel at the moment, which could mean that the bad cells are targeted in a kind of smart bomb way, and the good cells are allowed to survive. Chemotherapy is a horrible draining process for many people. That's an amazing technological breakthrough that is being developed in Israel. Are you simply going to say then, if you're someone who hates Israel and hates everything about it, well, we're going to boycott that healthcare as well, Ian? It just defies belief.
Well, it does, and it's not only like with medicine and with the phones. It's not just Apple, it's on Samsung, it's on all of them, right? It's like everything, like they sort of boycott McDonald's, boycott Coca-Cola, boycott Pepsi.
Well, I mean, the McDonald's one is also ludicrous because it's not actually the main McDonald's, it's a franchise, it's a private company that acts in Israel. And it's holding people, Jewish people in this country, or indeed even ordinary decent Israelis, responsible for what Benjamin Netanyahu does, whether you agree with it or whether you don't, is exactly the same as me saying, Ian, you live in the UK, you're obviously completely responsible for every single thing Keir Starmer does. It is ludicrous.
Well, I'll tell you a very funny story. Well, not funny, sad. Many, many years ago, I was out in the West End and I had a bit of a run-in with the police about something. And in a car, I was in one car, and in the car behind was a friend of mine, and in that car was he became a bit of a famous for a snooker, but he was an Irish boy, right? When we got pulled into this police station and everything went afterwards, he got the hell beaten out of him because he was Irish, right? This was the thing.
Yeah.
So basically, it was the time of all the bombings and everything.
Yeah, shouldn't have happened.
Irish,
shouldn't have happened. Yeah.
Right, and it's the same thing. But the thing is, with this, as I said to you at the very start, I would love to know what Mrs. Starmer says to Mr. Starmer. I don't know how he can even go into the place. Well, because quite simply, he's doing nothing. Nothing.
Ian, very, very interesting to talk to you. Thank you for your call today. That's Ian in London there. John in Lincolnshire says we should be very concerned about these left-wing activists knocking on doors, trying to identify Jewish households. Green Party is supporting this. That is correct. It is outrageous, and we know this echoes very much Nazi Germany in the 30s. We must have these people prosecuted, in John's opinion. Well, thank you for that. I want to go to Henry Hill now. He's Deputy Editor of Conservative Home and all the politics of the day. And Henry, it's great to have you on the programme. How are you this afternoon?
I'm well. How are you?
Yes, very well, thank you. I'm very concerned, though, about a number of issues, not just Ed Miliband on net zero, not just Keir Starmer and his support for a group that has been targeting journalists doing their job. But one thing, I don't know whether I'm concerned or not concerned. I wonder what you think as Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, finger on the pulse of what's going on with conservative grassroots activists, about Zia Yousaf's comments about opening the door to a patriotic election pact with the Conservatives. There's been so much criticism of Reform UK recently for taking in lots of Conservatives, people like Robert Jenrick and Nadine Dorries and Andrew Rossendale and lots of others as well, of their 8 MPs. I think 7 of them have at some stage been a member of the Conservative Party. I just wonder, Henry, what your view is on this. Is it inevitable? Is it something that your readers are likely to be happy about?
Some of them, certainly. I do think that at this point, the Conservative Party membership is selecting for people who have not joined Reform or left the Conservative Party. And so you would expect the Conservative Party membership to be a fairly loyal bunch these days, because historically, when people stuck with parties through thick and thin, you might have lots of very angry members. These days, those very angry people probably stop being members at some point. It's a very difficult thing for Reform, because on the one hand, unless they manage to nudge their polling up a bit, even from where it is now, and keep it there for several years, if they're to have any hope of forming a government, they are going to need allies in the House of Commons, and there aren't that many on the right. The Conservatives historically have only had the Democratic Unionists in Northern Ireland. I think that Reform would probably be in the same sort of basket: DUP, TUV, and the Conservative Party. So you do have that consideration. On the other hand, Reform will be very aware that an awful lot of their seats, I think 89 of the 98 seats where they came second in 2024, are Labour held. And they're often in parts of the country which, if they voted Conservative at all, only voted Conservative in 2019. These are the kind of people who felt very alienated from Labour, long-time Labour supporters, took a chance on the Tories, feel like the Tories let them down. And so if you're pitching for those voters, you don't want to look like you're simply the new version of the party that they chucked out 4 or 5 years ago. And so you need to maintain that distinctive offer. And I think this has been a problem for Reform with the defections that they've had, and it's a problem with the pact. So, and there's no easy way of squaring that circle, because otherwise, if Reform is saying we're going to form a one-party government, voters will quite rightly look at the polling and say, I don't think you are, mate.
Let's talk about Keir Starmer and the pressure he is under because of this pro-Labour group, very, very close to Keir Starmer, a group that was sort of seen as kind of his pet think tank, Labour Together. Its former leader is a man called Josh Simons, who's now a Labour MP, and we've asked him to come on this programme today. I asked him to come on my programme yesterday. No reply. What is the Sunday Times has revealed is that 2 of its journalists were targeted by a report. £36,000 were spent on it, and this is alleging completely falsely that they were Russian puppets. I mean, it's just not true. People like Gabriel Pogrund, who is one of the most decorated journalists in the country, I do often worry about the structural integrity of his mantelpiece. There are almost 10 pages in this report of deeply personal and fake claims about him. It also discussed his Jewish ethnicity, included false claims about his upbringing and his personal and professional relationships. What does Starmer do now? He's obviously got to distance himself from Labour Together. What do you make of this, Henry?
I mean, on the one hand, commissioning background investigations is something that happens, and it's not, when we say targeted, it's not, as far as I'm aware, putting bricks through their windows, telling them to back off or anything like that. But you're right, the contents of this report are absolutely extraordinary. It does seem to have become a real trope for some progressives. You saw this, I think you'll remember this, immediately after Brexit. Basically, Russia is everywhere, right? Anything that happens, any setback they have, any criticism they receive, it's Russia, it's Russian agents. Russian agents are behind Brexit. Russian agents are behind Reform UK. Russian agents are behind, apparently, critics of Labour Together. It's a very, very strange coping mechanism that these people have got for the fact that things aren't going their way. But frankly, the moment that you receive a report from an outside agency that starts pegging somebody's Jewishness to their conduct, that's the point that you sack that company. It's the point that you refuse to pay for the product and let them take you to court. And the fact that didn't happen, yeah, of course. I think to Keir Starmer, one of the things for which Starmer can be rightly credited is that he did manage to steer Labour out of the absolute sewer into which Jeremy Corbyn's leadership had led the Labour Party. There were deep fears amongst Britain's Jewish community during Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, and Starmer did distance himself from that. It is essential, if he is to live up to the reputation that he earned doing that he distance himself from Labour Together, or at least insists that they do what is necessary internally to dismiss the people who commissioned this report.
Henry, thank you. Henry Hill there, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. And actually, it wasn't just Bristol and Brighton where these door knocks are happening. Thank you to the listener who's reminded me about a piece of film I saw over the weekend. A very great woman, brave woman called Jean Hatchett, who confronted these people who were doing this door-to-door harassment in Sheffield. She confronted them, shouting that it was a Jew hunt, and they walked away. Thank you to Mary in County Down, who says this pro-Palestinian activism is a spectrum. Marching around screeching free Palestine from the river to the sea is at one end, escalating through to boycott campaigns, door-to-door targeting of householders. At the far end is terrorism against Jews. What are the police, the judiciary and the government doing to disrupt this spectrum? And can we remember that not only are Jews being hunted in their homes, they're also being murdered in their synagogues, for example, in Manchester. Let's talk to Andrew in Hertfordshire, who has some thoughts about this, and Matt Lucas. Andrew has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. You're very welcome to the programme, Andrew. What would you like to say?
Look, this Matt Lucas situation is not a problem at all. All right? Just got to get that through your head. He's on the tube. The man who videoed him used a phone. He went through the turnstiles using a debit card or a Oyster card. He's on video. Find him. And this is the crux of the left wing. Harassment, alarm and distress. I can go around my daily work because that's what I want to do. If you want to campaign for free Percy Pigs for everybody, you can't disrupt me. They cannot do this to individuals. It's the core of British society.
But I totally agree with you, Andrew, but they're doing it, and they're doing it over and over again.
Yeah, they are, because everybody that's on this programme who's got a problem with it, write to the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, make a formal complaint about that, and report it as a crime, as I'm going to do. And then they have to act. And then write to Starmer at the Houses of Parliament. We've got to draw a line. This is Kristallnacht. This is what the Nazis did to the Jews prior to getting control of Germany and the concentration camps. This is what they did. We are an anti-Semitic society. We've got to wake up to this. The judiciary, the hospitals, universities and schools are anti-Semitic.
Andrew, thanks for your thoughts. I mean, I can't disagree with any of that. There are so many elements of anti-Semitism in our society. What is the Mayor of London doing about this? What is Sadiq Khan doing about this? What's he said? How has this been investigated? What's the Met doing? Can I just ask the team behind the glass, actually, to contact Sadiq Khan's office? Will he deny this? And will he decry this? Will he condemn this without saying, we abhor all forms of racism? Okay, we all abhor all forms of racism, of course we do. Will he say it without saying that? Will he say it without qualifying that? We're going to contact the Metropolitan Police and ask them whether they are investigating. We're going to contact Sadiq Khan and ask him what he has done about this and what he has said about this and what he is doing about this and how he is stopping this happening. Because he's the Mayor of London and he is the person who's meant to stop this happen. We're looking for political leadership. We are crying out for political leadership and we're not getting it. The top team behind the glass is on the case right now. Paul in Belfast says the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood famously conducted a sit-down protest as a Labour MP in supermarkets such as Sainsbury's, calling for a boycott on Israeli goods. Is it any wonder other anti-Semitic idiots jump on the bandwagon? I'm sure Shabana Mahmood would deny being an anti-Semite. Lorraine has been in touch and says, I think there's a far more sinister aspect of these anti-Semites supported by the Green Party knocking on doors. What they're doing is hunting down and establishing where Jews or pro-Israeli residents live. Are they keeping a record of this for potential future intimidation? Are we going to paint yellow stars on their doors next? This is a very serious development and all those anti-Semites should be arrested for harassment, racism and anti-Semitism. This is so dangerous. Lorraine, I agree with every single word you've just said. We're going to talk in just a second to the former Immigration Minister Kevin Foster about the 70 people who came across on small boats. Their phones were taken off them. They took legal action and now each of those 70 people, totalling about £500,000, each of them has got £6,500 of taxpayers' money. Yes, really. Britain 2026. Stay with us here on Talk.
You said that he's going to cover Manchester.
Most of Manchester. He's covering most of Manchester.
No, he's going to build solar farms big enough to cover Manchester.
That's what I said.
It's not going to cover Manchester.
Why does it say it in the Telegraph then?
Oh, my God.
It says it in black and white.
Samara, do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying. I do understand what Ash is saying too, though.
Because
it rains. Do you think he's going to cover Manchester?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who has been in touch, including Brad in Cambridge. She says, hi Peter, I have been a Reform UK member for a long time. I said from the outset Reform would need to work with others to beat the combined forces of the left and the woke establishment. I simply cannot see why others are against that. Margaret in Birmingham says this country is on its knees. Now we're paying compensation to migrants invading our country. We need to hear from Shabana Mahmood to talk our way out of this shambles. We'll talk about that in a second. James says the illegal migrants didn't sue the government. It was human rights lawyers who sued using illegal migrants as a vehicle to line their own pockets with plenty of money. It is scandalous. And Becca says, no wonder Restore Britain, this is of course Rupert Lowe's new party, has gained 50,000 members in 48 hours. Reform have just proved we can't trust them in Becca's view. We don't want to have a pact with the Conservatives. The British public punished them at the last election for a reason, says Becca. On Twitter as well, reaction to the door knocking of people who are doing this Jew hunt, quite frankly. It's happened in Sheffield, as that has been pointed out. This door knocking isn't just happening in Brighton, but in Sheffield and Bristol too. Thank you, Fran, for that. And yes, there it is with the, been sent the graphic here, I've seen that before, the Sheffield one with the watermelon support there. Jan says, hi Peter, on the compensation claims for migrant mobile phones being confiscated. This is the tip of the iceberg, because every other small boat migrant will now be in line for the same. It could cost taxpayers millions, if not billions. This is the front page of the Sun newspaper this morning. I want to talk to Kevin Foster now, former immigration minister under the Conservatives. He was an MP for Torbay. Kevin, good afternoon to you. What do you think about the fact, and was this inevitable actually, that £6,500 has been given to these migrants? Because I fear, and I wonder what you think, that human rights law was always going to be used here.
Well, it's, but that's my instant reaction, like anyone else listening to this. It's absolutely infuriating. You know, these are people who were arriving in a small boat, knew they were breaking the law by doing so, and had their phones seized at that point. You know, we're not talking about border officers or police officers just walking down a street and taking someone's phone off them. They'd actually been arrived in a small boat. And people are right to point to the fact that, you know, this is human rights lawyers. I think we're talking, not only we're talking about £500,000 of compensation for these 73 cases possibly involved directly, but there's potentially up to 1,000 others that could also come in.
So this is just 70 of them. So Kevin, this is just 70 people, £500,000. This is the High Court, activist judges yet again ruling that nabbing the phones and data was illegal and in breach of European human rights law. So this is just £500,000 for 70 people. You're saying there could be up to 1,000 people who are maybe covered under this ruling, which would mean what, £5-6 million perhaps?
Yeah, certainly. I think if you read the Sun's report today, which is where this brought this to attention, they said
front page of the paper today, £500,000 phone compo for migrants. Just holding up the front page of the Sun there. I've read that. Yep, go ahead, Kevin.
Absolutely infuriating. In the article there, it points to the fact there may be even more cases. And it does bring up a couple of points. The first is broad discussion that the government does need to have about border forces currently effectively civil servants with law enforcement powers. Should it become a proper border police that would then have law enforcement powers? And that would sound rather technical to people listening, but it would mean on things like seizing potential evidence, it makes it a lot more legally easier to do so. And I think we'd all say that actually the reason most countries have a border police is to enforce at the border. And that's what we need to do here, against particularly when criminal gangs are involved. And then also it does bring up yet again the issue of the European Court of Human Rights.
Why did the government not know that? Why did the government not know that, Kevin? If they were saying, and I remember this at the time, there's a huge kind of, we're going to sort this, it's all going to be marvellous, everything is going to be amazing, we're going to take their mobile phones off them. Well, how did they not know that they would be open to challenge by the European Convention on Human Rights, by the European Court of Human Rights, and the High Court implementing that. I mean, wasn't this always going to happen? It's ludicrous, it's absurd. Border officials searched illegal migrants' phones. They are arriving here illegally. They should have no rights. Instead, the ECHR gives them far more rights than many people who have contributed to this country and won't get £6,500 if their mobile phones are taken away. As we know, there's a scourge, a real problem of people having their mobile phones stolen. No chance of £6,500 compensation for that. You're lucky if your insurance company pays out at all.
Absolutely. I think anything I ever did in immigration, you knew you'd almost certainly end up getting legally challenged. It would be how far the courts would stretch the interpretation. I think some of the cases we've seen, certainly over the last couple of years, involving the European Convention, have taken it into places that, you know, if you sat down the original authors of the convention who were thinking about what happened during the Second World War and immediately before it, they wouldn't say, well, people, you know, arriving illegally in your country and you check what they've got on them for evidence about which gangs brought them there. But I think very few people would have thought that's the sort of thing that
I love these people, Kevin. I love these people, Kevin, who lionize and say how amazingly, wonderfully brilliant 1951 European Convention on Human Rights was. Yes, let's not do Nazism again. Great idea. But actually, at the time, capital punishment was legal. Corporal punishment was legal. It wasn't this amazing Shangri-La of human rights. And of course, it's developed over the time.
Homosexuality was still illegal for many decades in most parts of Europe after the convention was signed, including the UK, into England until 1967. So, yeah, the idea that all this was what the convention intended. It's not the only bit of international law written decades ago we've seen stretched in the migration terms into areas that it was never intended to be. The Statelessness Convention is another example. So it does present, this type of case does present two challenges to the government. The first is whether it wants to move Border Force from being a civil service group to being a proper police force. I think that's certainly a case that these sort of things are making out. And the second is the issue of the whole sort of Gordian knot of international law that's been used by human rights actually to really, what will really get people as well, is actually using legal aid, you know, funded by the taxpayer again, to challenge things that few would see this as an unreasonable thing to do. For a border officer, when you have illegally entered the country, almost certainly having paid a criminal gang for you to do that, to seize phone or other things that are on you to try and identify who it is you have paid.
And there's a clear purpose for them. They're not taking these mobile phones off these illegal immigrants because they want to play Candy Crush. They're doing it for a particular reason. They're doing it to try to identify those people, to smash the gangs, a phrase, a much maligned phrase. Actually, interestingly, you mentioned human rights law, and interestingly, you mentioned the international law aspect, because we're going to be talking to Mark Francois a little bit later on, an astonishing development on the Chagos Islands. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. Just before you go, Kevin, the Home Office, another story in the Sun today, the Home Office cannot say how many boat migrants have been caught pretending to be children since Labour got power. I mean, many people ask the reasonable question, why not? You've told us before.
Yeah, I think it's hard to believe they don't know the figure. It's the sort of thing we used to monitor, was people who'd claimed to be children, then being found to be adults, because actually it's a massive safeguarding issue beyond any thoughts on immigration. You know, adults are ending up in children's services and accommodation. That is a huge safeguarding issue.
In schools sometimes,
So I cannot believe for 1 minute they're not monitoring this. I suspect they don't want to give the answer, not because they haven't got the answer. And that then obviously brings on to questions about, well, what does that mean? And in particular, one of the pieces of legislation they did in their borders bill was to remove the potential ability to compel people to take scientific age assessments, which, by the way, are used across most of Europe and is something that we need to do here. It's something I hope we would have put in place more quickly. But it's something that people can work out why, if you don't want to do a scientific age assessment, it's pretty obvious why you don't want to do that.
Well, indeed. Thank you very much indeed. Kevin Foster there, former Immigration Minister. What do you think about this? 0344 499 1000. Paul says these illegal immigrants have their mobile phones taken from them on arrival in the UK. The next day they get given a mobile phone, probably an upgraded one, as part of their welcome to the UK arrival package. Later on, they're given thousands of taxpayers' pounds for being without a phone for a matter of hours, maybe days. What is wrong with this useless country, says Paul? Brian says the answer is quite simple about compensation given to these illegal migrants. They should be fined £6,500 for entering the UK illegally. Paul says even the so-called Middle Ground Alliance party in Northern Ireland are dabbling in the pro-Palestine, anti-Jewish question. Alliance party members knocked my door last week, and instead of talking about local matters, we're canvassing to support lighting up City Hall with the Palestinian flag colours instead of the Union Jack door shut firmly in their face. Leslie says Labour blaming the Tories for phone compensation for migrants, yet Mahmoud long ago said in Parliament that it was Labour policy to confiscate phones. Well, this is the thing. This is the thing, Leslie. If they come up with this policy, surely they have an army of government lawyers who they can say, right, I'm the Home Secretary, I want to do something. Is this legal? Yes or no? The lawyers come back and say, well, you're very vulnerable to challenge under the European Convention of Human Rights. Maybe you shouldn't do it. Personally, I think mobile phones should absolutely be taken from illegal migrants. I have no issue with that whatsoever. But if you know as Home Secretary, because you're told by the government legal service, by the lawyers you employ, that you're about to be sued, well, maybe you would think about it again. It is absolute madness. Ryan says, good afternoon, Peter. Good afternoon, Ryan. Keir Starmer is simply insufferable. He's out for his own agenda and has no intention of tackling immigration and actually welcomes it, but he won't admit that in the public. We're going to talk about Marco Rubio in a second, what he's been saying at the Munich Security Conference. This speech has lit up so many people's imaginations in regard to what the relationship between America, Europe and the UK should be. We'll talk about the Chagos deal and maybe Jonathan Powell, its architect, leaving Number 10, and also whether there should be a reform pact with the Conservative Party. Whatever you think, whatever your view is, however you want to express it, get in touch. 0344 499 1000. Rear Admiral Dr. Chris Parry coming next. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much for all the messages that you have sent in. Plenty of calls too. We will take all your calls, text, tweets and voice notes, as many as we can, between now and 4 o'clock, and indeed in just after the break we're about to have. But in the meantime, I want to talk to Rear Admiral Dr. Chris Parry, former NATO commander and strategic forecaster. He's also the Reform UK candidate for the Hampshire and the Solent mayoral election, which is expected in May 2026 if Labour don't postpone it. Chris, you're very welcome to the programme. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm fine. Labour have postponed it, of course. They've postponed the election till 2028.
Sorry, I totally missed that. I didn't know that about Hampshire and the Solent. So you're going to be the candidate for another couple of years?
Yep, it's going to be a marathon rather than a sprint this time. It's a great shame we're not going ahead in May, because people want to vote in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. They actually want to have their say, and we're being denied it, unfortunately.
So what do you think about what Zia Youssef has been saying of your party? He's been talking about a potential pact with the Conservatives.
Well, I haven't spoken to Zia about that, and I think it's only speculation, to tell you the truth. Reform are very strong at the moment. They're certainly very strong in my part of the world. And I think those are things that... I mean,
he said yesterday that his party would do the patriotic thing if faced with the prospect of a government comprising Labour, the Greens and the Liberal Democrats. I mean, surely it's speculation, but he didn't rule it out.
Well, right now, I mean, within the party, we think we can win an outright majority in a general election, and all the trajectories suggest that's the case. I mean, we're back to the old issue where when the facts change, one's opinion changes. The fact of life is to get rid of this current Labour government and to get rid of any sort of thing that is destructive for the interests of the British people, then everything's on the table. Of course it is. I think people have to be pragmatic about it.
Do you fear the emergence of Restore Britain?
Well, personally, no, I don't. I mean, my own view is that everybody is an ally in getting this UK, this Labour government out of power. It's destroying the very fabric of our lives every day. Yeah, we can't say that people are a threat. Not at that level, no.
Well, let's talk about the speech of Marco Rubio over the weekend. This was pretty astonishing and quite heartwarming stuff, actually. It was a really, really good speech that he made to the Munich Security Conference. This is Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, the Foreign Secretary, essentially, of the Americans, talking about the United Nations.
The United Nations still has tremendous potential to be a tool for good in the world. But we cannot ignore that today, on the most pressing matters before us, it has no answers and has played virtually no role. It could not solve the war in Gaza. Instead, it was American leadership that freed captives from barbarians and brought about a fragile truce. It has not solved the war in Ukraine. It took American leadership in partnership with many of the countries here today just to bring the two sides to the table in search of a still elusive peace.
I just want to talk about the idea of the West's managed decline as well. Another really interesting extract of this speech from Marco Rubio. Let's play that.
For we in America have no interest in being polite and orderly caretakers of the West's managed decline. We do not seek to separate, but to revitalize an old friendship and renew the greatest civilization in human history. What we want is a reinvigorated alliance that recognizes that what has ailed our societies is not just a set of bad policies, but a malaise of hopelessness and complacency. An alliance the alliance that we want is one that is not paralyzed into inaction by fear. Fear of climate change, fear of war, fear of technology. Instead, we want an alliance that boldly races into the future.
An alliance that boldly races into the future. I am pretty sure that an awful lot of our viewers and listeners, Chris, would agree with me that the UK and other European governments are destroying what we hold dear as the pillars of Western civilization. We built America, and now America is begging us not to destroy what we're about. I just wonder if you agree with that sentiment and what your thoughts are on what Rubio has said, Chris.
Yeah, I think what we've got to understand is there is a new dynamic in the world today. In the past, we've been used to sort of Cold War. We've been used to block-on-block sort of confrontation that we've had between the free world and the autocratic Eurasian states. What we seem to have moved into now is a civilizational issue. We know that China's pushing its civilization at the moment, its civilizational roots. We know that Russia is, in terms of what it used to be. America is saying we are the custodians of that Western tradition. Everybody I talk to in the States is talking about why has Europe betrayed itself. One interesting comparison I heard recently this week is that if you compare it to the Roman Empire in the West is utterly decaying. And of course, it fell in 410. But of course, the tradition of Roman leadership was carried on in Byzantium, in Constantinople afterwards. And the Americans are seeing themselves in that role at the moment. And everywhere you look right now, the old issues of left and right, of block-on-block confrontation is disappearing. And what you're seeing is civilizations emerging now as the fault lines between the way the world is developing. If you look at the Iranian regime right now, you're seeing a lot of Persian statues and imagery starting to appear on the streets of Isfahan and Tehran. And so what we're seeing, I think, is a revival of that idea. And what the Americans are tapping into is very much that they are the new guardians of Western civilization. And they're saying to old Europe, look, you know, we'd like to be partners with you, but we're going to go it alone if you don't want to follow us. And if you're going to be beset by all these international treaties that you like, if you're going to continue looking at the climate crisis, all these other things that are distracting us from actually restoring and rebuilding our civilization, then you're on your own. It's as simple as that.
He also talked about leadership and retrieving and restoring values and key values for the West and statesmanship. Is there a statesman or stateswoman who can actually lead us, someone with a big vision, not just sort of limited, awkward, small-minded Starmer types? And people will question that both with America, will question it here as well. I wonder if I can ask you, Chris, as well, about what happened outside the hall, because we had 250,000 people in Munich supporting the Iranian people, not the Iranian regime, which is repressive, horrible, dreadful human rights abuses, but 250,000 people in Munich alone, to say nothing of many, many other cities around the world, including here in London, supporting the Iranian people. I think that's great. I think that is absolutely to be supported. And I just wonder if you think the people inside the hall were actually listening to that, and was the media listening as well? I didn't see a single word on that on, for example, the BBC until last night.
There's no doubt that Iran is in crisis right now. It's obviously suffered external attack by Israel and by the United States. There's internal issues going on between the Ministry of Intelligence and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. They've had this recent insurgency around the country. But I think, Peter, what we have to understand in relation to totalitarian regimes like this, and it was the same with Japan and, of course, Germany at the end of the Second World War. Unless you knock over a heavily repressive regime, which has huge instruments of repression, there's no doubt about it, unless you really knock them over, the people are never going to be able to rise up and get rid of that regime. It's not a culture that is like, if you like, the colour revolutions in Eastern Europe and things like that. And there was no restraining influence at all on the regime in the amount of force and repression it can put on its people. And quite a lot of those instruments of repression have a vested interest, not only in the economy, but also in their own survival. If you consider the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, for example, controls 1/3 of the Iranian economy, including quite a lot of the offshore oil and gas. They're in a very heavy repressive sort of environment there. And without that external pressure, there is absolutely no chance. And by pressure, I mean military pressure. There is no chance that the people will be able to rise up against that regime.
Rubio, I think, is a statesman. I agree with him on an awful lot of things, and I think he never shies away from his opinions, and I agree with him almost totally on the Middle East. I wonder if we could talk about another person who spoke to the Munich Security Conference, Keir Starmer. And on Saturday, he essentially said that if you go to the left and vote Green, or you go to the right and vote Reform UK, your party, Chris, that risks war. I wonder what you think about that.
Oh, it's absolute tosh, Peter. I mean, for heaven's sake, I'd like to see the linkages in political military terms. Look, I'm in Reform. I've spent my life, over 45 years, combating Russia and the former Soviet Union. I've been up in the Barents Sea in the freezing cold. Okay, if I thought there was any chance that reform would lead to helping Russia in any way, I wouldn't be in the party. It's as simple as that. And these constant slurs are just designed to deflect away from all these crises.
It's not a slur, though, to say that the leader in Wales, Nathan Gill, is now serving time for being influenced by Russia and asking questions on behalf of Russia. Is it, though?
Yeah, Peter, look, he's one person who was bowled out very easily. He's been disowned by Reform. I can tell you, during the Falkland Islands, a Labour MP got up and betrayed us all by saying we were reading the Argentinian codes. He was made a peer by Tony Blair. So, we can't have Labour throwing this out all the time about Nathan Gill, who's a minor personality. We have a peer in the House of Lords right now who betrayed me and my comrades in the Falklands. So we can't have the Labour Party talking about this.
And you're clear that Nigel Farage is totally anti-Russia. You're absolutely clear about that, because that's the mud that's being thrown at him.
Yeah, it's constantly being thrown at people in Reform. We abhor Russia. We hate the regime, and everybody I speak to in Reform and everybody around the country hates what's happening in Ukraine, and we are utterly opposed to what is happening in Russia.
Chris, thank you. Much appreciated. Rear Admiral Dr. Chris Parry, former NATO commander and strategic forecaster. He's also the Reform UK candidate for the Hampshire and the Solent mayoral election, which I've now learned is one of those postponed ones that is going to happen in 2028, hopefully. Thank you to Ben in Belfast, who says, Peter, I found a line from Marco Rubio's speech in Munich. I found you a Northern Ireland angle. Marco Rubio also said our frontiers were shaped by Scots-Irish, that proud, hearty clan from the hills of Ulster that gave us Davy Crockett and Mark Twain and Teddy Roosevelt and Neil Armstrong. It will surprise you not a jot that I was sitting This is really embarrassing. I'm going to tell you anyway because it's a stupid, funny story, I think, anyway. I was 7 years old, and a girl who was in class with me in school said that Neil Armstrong, first man on the moon, was her 11th cousin. I said, that's not true. She said, no, I promise you, Neil Armstrong, whose family came from Northern Ireland way, way, way back, is my 11th cousin. I said, that's just not true. She said, look, my mum will tell you. That afternoon when I got home from school, I looked up her number in the phone book, I rang her mother and said, Mrs. Troughton, is Neil Armstrong your 11th cousin? She said, yes, we've done the genealogy research and Neil Armstrong is our 11th cousin. I said, thank you very much, and put the phone down. Yeah. Lots to discuss. Your calls are next here on Talk. Stay with us.
You said that he's going to cover Manchester.
Most of Manchester. He's covering most of Manchester.
No, he's going to build solar farms big enough to cover Manchester.
That's what I said.
It's not going to cover Manchester.
Why does it say it in the Telegraph then?
Oh, my God.
It says it in black and white.
Samara, do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying. I do understand what Ash is saying too, though.
Because
do you think he's going to cover Manchester?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Mark in Stratford has been on the text. He says, hi Peter, the people that have been wetting themselves about Rupert Lowe's Restore Britain party are deluded. They may have 50,000 new members, but these will be those online who've actually heard of him. Most of the country haven't a clue who Rupert Lowe is, says Mark, and I can't see them gaining any real political ground. It's a ballot box where it counts. A damp squib of a party, just like Advance UK, which I predict will fall flat on its face, says Mark. Well, it'll be very interesting to see if Rupert Lowe and indeed Ben Habib will join forces, perhaps. I want to talk now to Martin in London about this electoral pact and his views on this. This is Reform UK and Zia Youssef, its policy chief, failing to rule out a possible pact with the Conservatives either before or after the election. Martin, what do you think about this? I know you're a Reform voter.
Good afternoon, Peter. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Yeah, how are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. Yeah, as a Reform voter, obviously I want Reform to win the next election, but if they were to fall just short, I think it would be a no-brainer to have to do some sort of agreement, even if it was just something like a confidence and supply agreement, because the alternative, Keir Starmer's Labour, the Greens, the SNP, probably a couple of Gaza independents, I mean, the rainbow coalition of hell.
Yeah, I do really worry about who would be in that coalition. I mean, it's also the Green Party just worries me because people sort of think, oh, they're these cuddly people who want you to, separate your rubbish into recycling bags. No, they're endorsing people who are going around knocking doors, basically finding out whether people are Jewish. A Jew hunt, as it has correctly been called. Why on earth would you endorse that? I mean, this Islamofascism is horrendous. I don't want those people anywhere near our government.
I agree. Yeah, the good old days of the Green Party, when it was all about the environment, that's long gone. I mean, when you look at what's happened since Polanski's taken over, I mean, they are becoming incredibly extreme. I mean, if you look on, I know social media is not the world, but if you look at some of the people that are now attaching themselves to the Green Party.
He wants to legalise all drugs, Martin.
Oh, I know.
All drugs. He wants to legalise heroin.
I know. We'll have crackheads everywhere roaming the streets if he had it his way. I mean, it's a great example of, of when you look on social media, it's a bit like what you're seeing with Rupert Lowe's new party now, where if you look on social media, you'd almost think he's going to be the Prime Minister. But in reality, it's never going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, Rupert Lowe obviously not responsible for some of the people who are endorsing him as well. Martin, very interesting to talk to you. Thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Gary's in Ipswich and wants to talk about this front page story in the Sun today. 500k phone compo for migrants. Their human rights were breached. There is fury as they pocket £6,500 each. This is more than 40 boat migrants who had mobile phones seized when reaching the UK have won payments totalling £500,000. The High Court judges, Lord Justice Edis and Mr Justice Lane, delivered the ruling that the policy was illegal and breached the European Convention on Human Rights. What do you think, Gary, of this? You're very welcome to the programme.
I want more information. I want to know the people that signed that off. I want to know how the money is paid to the migrants. Is it through a bank account? Is it through a credit card? Is it cash that they've been given? I would also like to know whether the phones were doctored with information. Is there some sort of call that they're going to get? Where each person with a returned phone is placed? Are they placed in different hotels all around the country? Are they possibly going to be actually the leaders of groups of people in these hotels? And at some stage they'll be called and say, get ready to mobilise? Because there's so many things that are wrong about this. You've got so many people struggling, and yet you've got people within. I don't know who would have signed that off. Would it have been the DWP? I can't.
Well, it's the High Court that has ordered the government to do it. It'll be fascinating as well to see the numbers involved, because that's just 70 people. This is essentially a test case. So you could have, even by what the Sun is saying, and I'm sure it's true, and we're talking to the former Immigration Minister Kevin Foster a little bit earlier on, you could have up to 1,000 people. So more than 10 times, 12, 13 times this number could get this compensation.
Well, the money is incidental. It's the problem I have with it is a conspiracy theory about what these people can actually become in a later date.
Well, I mean, there are many people who have that worry, certainly, Gary, and worry about the changing nature of the culture of this country. I'm sure some of them are absolutely okay. They're illegal people, but they nonetheless want a better life in this country. Maybe they're genuine asylum seekers, maybe they're not. But we know, certainly, Gary, that there have been many, many people who have been convicted of crimes, who have raped people, who have done horrible things, who've murdered people, who've come across in those boats. We don't know who they are. And one way to find out a little bit about them is to take their mobile phones. But that's illegal. That's a breach of their human rights, apparently.
I would sort of like to go back 30 years to a Richard Littlejohn article in the Mail when he said that Labour, this is pre-Labour coming in 1997, probably before you were born, that they were placing people in positions of power that would infiltrate our system. And this is what's happened all of these years later. Our whole system is infiltrated by people that haven't got the heart of the British people at their fore.
Gary, listen, thanks so much for your comments there, particularly the one that you assumed I was under 30. That's very kind. Appreciate your thoughts there. I just want to remind ourselves what happened to Matt Lucas on the train in London. This was in a tube station, actually, where someone started shouting at him, basically because he's Jewish. Let's have a look at this.
Free Palestine. Free Palestine, Matt Lucas. Free Palestine.
Hi, how are you?
You don't like the suit what I'm wearing, do you?
Sorry?
You don't like what I'm wearing?
No, I have no comment about it, by the way.
Palestinians. You've got a problem with Palestinians, man?
No.
Please, you can't do that. You can't grab my stuff.
Matt Lucas there at a tube station. We're in contact with British Transport Police and indeed the Mayor of London's office to see what they're doing about it. What are they going to do? How are they going to deal with this? Grace is in London and has some thoughts on this. She's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Grace, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi. First of all, I can't imagine either of us being born after 97. If only we were that young.
It'd be nice, wouldn't it?
But and also condolences regarding Palmerston.
Thank you. I've written about it for the Times today, actually. There's an article in the Times that I've written about the sad demise of Palmerston, the Foreign Office cat. But much more important, of course, is what happened to Matt Lucas. What do you think, Grace?
Yeah, I think it's horrifying, and it just speaks to me, again, of this thing that I keep contemplating about how some people seem to think that the way to stand up for social justice, and it is horrific what's going on in Gaza and how people are suffering there, I completely agree, but it's not actually the solution to be hateful towards other people, and yet that's what...
It's not Matt Lucas's fault.
...seem to think. Exactly. But we're kind of moving to this tribal space where we think the way to do good is to just hate the people on the other side, or suppose... I don't think he even is on the other side, because he's not expressed any...
Well, exactly. I have no idea. He happens to be Jewish, and I have no idea what he thinks about the Middle East. What we do know is that he's Jewish, and that person will have assumed that his view on the Middle East was something because he is Jewish. It is hatred against Jewish. It's anti-Semitism, pure and simple, Grace.
Yeah, I mean, as we often say, the values in our country were really shaped by a particular man 2,000 years ago who was himself Jewish.
Indeed.
And he told us to love our enemies. And the more we move away from that into this kind of tribalism of I'm on this side and you're on that side, and so I shall prove how great and righteous I am by hating those people over there, we're moving towards a really dangerous space. But I don't think, coming on to what Marco Rubio was saying, I don't think that America is necessarily, or at least the Trump administration, is necessarily upholding the Western values that we might want to have, because Trump himself has been very violent and hateful in his rhetoric.
Well, let's talk about that on another occasion, Grace, because you're just going to crash the news. But sorry to cut you off, but Grace, we will discuss that on a future occasion. I know you're a regular caller, and it's always good to hear your views, whether I agree with them or not. Plenty more to come in the next hour. We're going to talk to Norman Baker in a second about Andrew and Epstein. The revelations continue.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much to everybody who has contacted me. It's just gone 2 o'clock and there is loads to discuss. We're going to discuss it between now and 4 o'clock here on Talk before Kevin O'Sullivan comes up with Drive. I'm here today, tomorrow and Wednesday filling in for Ian Collins. Thank you to everybody who's contacted me. Norman Baker coming up next, the former government minister and author of And What Do You Do? What the Royal Family Don't Want You to Know. We'll be talking about Epstein and Andrew. The revelations just continue. What are the police waiting for? Calls for a criminal probe into Andrew are growing. Dozens of documents redacted after release as well, and the full list of hundreds of celebrities and politicians in the Epstein files, in an Epstein files letter. We'll talk to Norman Baker about that. We'll also talk about the Chagos deal. Really interesting to talk about this. There's been a major development on it, and the Conservative MP, Mark Francois, is going to take us through it. We've been lied to, and Parliament has been lied to. We're also going to talk about Iran. Hundreds of thousands of people, 250,000 of them in Munich alone at the security conference there, joining Iran protests around the world, and many demonstrations held to oppose the horrendous regime there, including in London as well. Lots to discuss today, whatever your thought is on that. And indeed, the front page of The Sun, £500,000 phone compensation for migrants because their human rights were breached, apparently, according to the High Court, when their mobile phones were taken away. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note, less than a minute, please, if you would. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring, all on the main number, 0344 499 1000. And many thanks to Bob in Cheltenham, who has reacted to my story as a 9-year-old ringing up a harassed Northern Irish housewife to ask her if she was Neil Armstrong's 11th cousin and whether that was true. Bob says, even at that age, you're a complete nightmare. Loads to discuss between now and 4. Stay with us here on Talk. There's a lot on Reform UK as well. Zia Youssef, the policy chief, not ruling out some form of electoral pact, perhaps with the Conservatives. Brian has said, he's in Lanzarote. Hi, Brian. Reform have to win the next election. The only party to stop civil unrest, because if Labour get in, that is what will happen, says Brian. Well, let's hope not, certainly. But let's talk about, of course, something like Keir Starmer's grappling with the Mandelson scandal. But there are yet more revelations now about Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor and Jeffrey Epstein. There are so many different things coming out. There are calls for a criminal probe into Andrew. Fresh claims show it's clear in many people's view that he abused his position. He, of course, denies all of that. We'll talk to Norman Baker now. He's a former government minister and author of And What Do You Do? What the Royal Family Don't Want You to Know. Norman, great to talk to you. Should there be a criminal investigation into Andrew?
Of course, there should have been one years ago, because there's been enough evidence put to the Metropolitan Police and other police forces over many years, making allegations not simply about his link to Epstein and the allegations made by Virginia Giuffre at the time, which the Metropolitan Police did nothing about, although their policy at the time was to believe victims. They didn't believe her, it seems. But also all the evidence now tumbling out, which supports what's in my book, about the way in which Andrew conducted himself as trade envoy, where clearly he was not batting for Britain, but batting for himself, and running up meetings with a whole range of really quite dodgy characters in the process. But the new evidence, I think, today, this last week, has been that not only had he been looking after himself, but he apparently, according to these leaks from the Epstein papers, or releases from the Epstein papers, suggest he's been giving sensitive and critical information of importance in this country to foreign individuals. Mm-hmm. And in my mind, that's treason.
Well, it's interesting as well, because one of the ways that they could, in theory, get Andrew, or prosecute him in theory, could be malfeasance in public office, and that is something that Peter Mandelson may well be facing as well. There's a criminal investigation into him, no charges or that have been brought yet, no arrests made, but searches of Peter Mandelson's homes, both in London and outside London. For Andrew as well, do you think that's the most likely way he could, in theory, be prosecuted, the same as Peter Mandelson?
Well, I mean, I certainly think that's a runner. But of course, what we've seen over the last 20 years has been the extreme reluctance of the Metropolitan Police and the police generally to look into any aspects of suggested improper behaviour by the royal family, by Andrew, or indeed others. Remember those bags full of euros cash which was handed to Charles, for example, when he was Prince of Wales. They do nothing about anything, the police.
Yeah, indeed, that exact, sorry to interrupt you, Norman, but that exact story about the bags of cash given to Charles was a story by Gabriel Pogrund, who was someone who Labour together have been looking into and putting horrible smears about, the journalist on the Sunday Times. It's interesting you say the Metropolitan Police have been reluctant. I just wonder if things are perhaps changing, because the Crown Prosecution Service, the country's top prosecutor, Stephen Parkinson, saying yesterday that the Duke of York is not above the law, saying no one is above the law. Do you think things might be changing slightly, given the absolute tsunami of revelations in regard to Andrew?
Yeah, it might be, Peter, because as you say, it's a tsunami of revelations, and that is perhaps pressure which cannot be resisted by the police. But, you know, they have resisted before, and they have said before that no one's above the law, but it hasn't stopped them approaching Andrew in a different way. And I think Andrew has behaved as he has done because he had the expectation that laws are for little people, not for him, and he was going to get away with it, whatever he was doing. I think that was his expectation, that there was deference to the royal family. He was covered by that. He was the Queen's favourite son, and he could do basically all he wanted. And it's time, in fact, that the chickens came home to roost, as far as Andrew's concerned.
Norman, the Queen, Queen Elizabeth, of course, is someone who is absolutely revered by my viewers and listeners. But I'm going to ask the question because it has to be asked. Did she have a role to play here? Was she part of this cover-up, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, £12 million was given to Virginia Giuffre. We don't know where that came from, but it appears to have come from other members of the royal family, including the Queen. And I think the default position of the royal family up until now, really, has been to, first of all, hope this will all go away. Secondly, if it won't go away, to isolate Andrew and say nothing to do with us. But there are increasingly questions, quite rightly being asked by the public, as to who in the royal family knew what, when. And that should have started really with the photograph of Andrew and Epstein in Central Park, New York in 2011, when that appeared. And certainly should have been asked, led to questions when the photograph appeared of Andrew with his arm around Virginia Giuffre, and they appear not to have been asked. So I think the royal family themselves now need to go further. They've been behind public opinion, and in my view, both the government and the palace should release all papers and emails which they have in relation to Andrew, so we can see exactly what's been going on.
We now have the full list as well of people who are named in the Epstein files. Now, simply being named in the Epstein files does not mean that you're guilty of anything, and we've got to be really, really clear about that. But some of the I mean, you know, Kamala Harris is in there, for example, Bill Gates, Rudy Giuliani, Mike Huckabee, who's the current US ambassador to the to Israel, Julian Assange, Steve Bannon, Joe Biden, John Bolton. Loads of different people are in those Epstein files. Given that we now know that actually dozens of documents identifying Prince Andrew by his former email address have now been redacted weeks after release. So some of it has been searchable, and you can just put in the email address and find all the references to him and all the emails he sent and so on. That's been redacted. I mean, it's unlikely, especially as the email address involved the start of it was TDOF, TDOY, sorry, the Duke of York. He's not the Duke of York anymore. I would imagine he's not using that email address anymore for plenty of reasons. I mean, given that that's been redacted retrospectively, what do you read into that, Norman? Because there are a lot of people very annoyed, including Jess Michaels, who's an Epstein survivor, who told The Sun this is thwarting justice, this is a cover-up of the crime. I wish I could tell you that all of this is shocking, but for us it's not. It's actually predictable. We are continuing to be gaslit. It's designed to protect those responsible and intimidate survivors to stop them coming forward.
Well, I'm afraid I've got some sympathy with that view, and quite clearly there's information which has not yet been released. Not all the Epstein papers have been released. I mean, there are millions of them, but they are still being held. And there's a suspicion, of course, that the ones which have been released are ones where people can be thrown to the wolves, including Prince Andrew, for that matter, ex-Prince Andrew, whereas people who are really important in American society are being protected. And let's just face this one fact, Peter. You know, there's been redactions allegedly to protect victims. Hundreds of victims, apparently, are implicated in what Epstein did. Hundreds of victims. Where are the prosecutions? The only people who've gone to prison are Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell.
Yes, and Mandelson and the Duke of York are the only people who've faced really any major ramifications from this. How hopeful are you, Norman? How hopeful, having seen things from the inside, but you've been a politician, you're a Liberal Democrat MP, you've been a government minister in the coalition, you've seen how things work from the inside in this country. How hopeful are you that truth and justice will happen here and will happen in America? Just break those two bits down for me and tell me what you think.
I'm more hopeful about this country than I am about America, because the parliamentary teams in different parties are now becoming involved. We've seen comments from Lib Dem and Tory MPs, for example, saying that we need to take this further. I think there is tremendous pressure on the Metropolitan Police now and the Director of Public Prosecutions, and that does count. In this country, public pressure does cause reactions from those in power. So I'm reasonably hopeful we'll see some action on this, either from the police or indeed from a parliamentary inquiry. We've already got a parliamentary inquiry now started, of course, into the Crown Estate, and looking at why these ridiculous peppercorn rents were available to Andrew and indeed Edward. So we know there's now become an appetite to look into these matters. I've long felt there's a huge problem with royal finances, hence my latest book, actually, which is called Royal Mint National Debt. And I've often thought there's a huge scandal there to be uncovered. And I think the public are now waking up to that. In terms of the America, I'm not so hopeful at all, I'm afraid, because it will depend really on Republican Congress people and Republican senators, because quite clearly the administration itself, the Trump administration, will not want to release any more than they have to. They've been dragged kicking and screaming to where they are now, notwithstanding pre-election pledges. But there are a handful of Republican congressmen and women who do want to see the papers released. I think if it does come down to a vote in Congress, we may get some progress. But beyond that, there's already been a vote in Congress demanding the papers all be released, and they haven't been released. Yeah. So there's a point at which the administration can just say we're not doing it.
Tell me about Royal Mint National Debt. Tell me more about that book.
That came out in November. It's an analysis of the royals' finances. It poses the question why a monarchy, a family that was bankrupt in 1760, is now worth billions and billions of pounds, and identifies where that money has come from, which is a number of sources, from the public purse most notably, from fiddling expenses, actually, from keeping gifts which are given to Britain as personal gifts, and from the effective annexation of the Duchy of Cornwall and Duchy of Lancaster, which in my view, and the view of many people, are public lands, and the money from those duchies, which comes to £50 million a year profit, should be going to the Treasury to pay for public services, rather than to the pockets of Charles and William.
Royal Mint National Debt. And who's that published by?
Bite Back.
Must have a look at that. Actually, strictly for Ofcom reasons, I should be very clear on to avoid a conflict of interest that Norman Baker and I are both published by Bite Back Publishing. My two books are The Secret Life of Special Advisors and indeed Political Animals. Norman Baker, thank you very much indeed. Norman is the author of And What Do You Do? What the Royal Family Don't Want You to Know, and indeed that book we just talked about a second ago, Royal Mint National Debt. Martin's been in touch with a voice note on immigration. This is what Martin has to say.
Hello, Peter. Talking about the mobile phone conversation for the crossing migrants. There's a couple of things I don't understand, really. They are entering the country illegally, which means they're eligible for arrest under the Police and Criminal Evidence Act 1984. Now, under the Police and Criminal Evidence Act 1984 PACE, under Section 19, that means you can seize items in association with criminality, i.e. their phones. Now, in Civvy Street, if a suspect gets nicked and their phone is seized under Section 19, eventually when the phone has been finished with, they get the phone back. That's it. They don't get compensation. They just get the phone back. I fail to see where this is coming from. Are we getting the right story? Is this just, spinning by the media? I don't get this. I don't understand this.
It does seem extraordinary. It is an extraordinary story. And whatever you think about the fact that 70 migrants who have come, or illegal migrants who have come across in small boats, are getting £6,500 each because their phones were taken away from them by Border Force. Lots to discuss in all of this. And if you want to get your voice on the air, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call, or send me a voice note just like Martin on the same number. Lots to discuss in just a second. Stay with us.
You said that he's going to cover Manchester. Hang on,
most of Manchester.
Finish.
He's covering most of Manchester.
But no, he's going to build solar farms big enough to cover Manchester.
That's what I said.
It's not going to cover Manchester.
Why does it say it in the Telegraph? Then?
Oh, my God.
It says it in black and white.
Samara, do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying. I do understand what Ash is saying too, though.
Because it rains.
Do you think he's going to cover Manchester?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who has been in touch. Matthew is in Warrington and has some thoughts on the migration story. You're very welcome to the programme, Matthew. What would you like to say?
As soon as a migrant says that he's under the age of 18, or he's a schooled boy or schooled child's age, he should be tested scientifically to ensure that that is correct.
They do have some tests they use, but they're not nearly advanced enough. And I mean, it should be very easy to work this out.
Whatever they need to do. I volunteer with the cadets, and we have a duty of care and to safeguard these young people, and rightly so. Yeah, we're quite willing to put unknown people, we don't know their backgrounds. They should be tagged, they should be DNA'd, and they should be fingerprinted. Every single one who comes into this country, and we know where they are. We don't know because if I get arrested for a minor offence now, they take my DNA.
Yeah. When I went into America a couple of months ago, went on holiday to America, and as soon as I went in, you know, take your fingerprints, take your thumbprint, both hands, how long are you here for, you know, you fill in a form, all the rest of it. They knew about me, they'd asked me questions that I ever tried to overthrow the government or things like that. You volunteer in the... Sorry?
You only tried the once.
Yes, I was unsuccessful. No, I mean, you volunteer with the cadets. I do some volunteering with a young person as well. We've been through the DBS stuff, I'm sure, the Disclosure and Barring Service, where they make sure you haven't got a criminal record. We've seen references from employers, all the rest of it. If you're going to be in those environments, you've got to have some checks, and that's absolutely. It was a bit of admin, a bit of going to my boss asking for a reference. That's fair enough.
Keeps going on about making sure our children are safe and this, that, and the other for different matters. But when it comes down to migrants, they don't. It's like they've got a free run, and we're all, you know, we've got to protect our women and children.
Absolutely.
And we're not. They're failing us massively. It doesn't take much. And plus, if you take a DNA swipe off anyone, it doesn't matter what country they're from, there's a world data. How do we not know that person is not a wanted?
Well, exactly, telling the truth about who they are, and the kind of checks that you and I have gone through, that many people watching and listening, Matthew, have gone through. I think that's the bare minimum. What do you make of this phone compensation?
I think it's ridiculous. Absolutely scandalous. If I get in, I could go in a car crash now, and break both my legs, and I'll be lucky to get £3,000. And they're going to get the second the phones off him. They're throwing the phones away.
Yeah.
It's scandalous. We're a bottomless pit. We're a money pot, and we need to remove legal aid. And a lot of this will stop. All these leeches lawyers who are sucking the life and money out of our country to benefit these migrants will soon move on to something more worthy.
I would simply, I'm not necessarily for getting rid of legal aid per se, but what I am for is people who have contributed absolutely nothing in taxes or have contributed absolutely nothing to this country not getting legal aid.
They should set the £6,500. Say, all right, well, that'll come straight back to us because it'll help pay for your accommodation and everything else that we're giving for you.
Totally.
£6,500 in Afghanistan. That's several. They could buy They could go back and live comfortably for several years.
It's a lot of money. Matthew, listen, thanks for your thoughts. Appreciate that. David's in Exeter, and our next caller, 0344 499 1000, the number he has called. David, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter.
Hi there.
Just want to try and get into what Starmer has sort of been talking about, that he's not, well, so he's been to Munich, the big defence conference there.
Yeah.
And they're trying to sort of push on with really European Defence and Security Union, but the language that Keir Starmer's using that's sort of being propagated here in the UK to the taxpaying public here doesn't really articulate what European Defence Union actually is and about in the destination, because he's dressing it up in a very cloaked fashion.
So what do you think he should be saying? How should he be honest about it?
Well, that's exactly the point. Is really what he needs to be saying to the great British public and the taxpayers about, because this concerns His Majesty's Armed Forces and all our defence industry directly. Mm-hmm. So in their manifesto, they stated, and it was only like a one-line thing. If you did not look carefully, you'd have missed it. That they wanted to seek a defence pact with the EU. Mm-hmm. But of course, Ursula and the Commission, they're only offering defence union, which is unify existing defence and security services in the EU zone. But she wants one single EU-appointed defence contractor. So if you can imagine, Peter,
why on earth would the former Defence Minister of Germany want a single person in charge of a single defence agency? It's almost as if she would want to consolidate her own power in some way, David.
Well, the concept is single point. So a single point, so the correct definition, if Starmer wanted to, or Jonathan Powell particularly, because it's Jonathan Powell that went in with him to meet Ursula on this, and he's been sort of driving this in the background as National Security Advisor. Not that I think we've got national security at the minute, all things considered. But the concept is this, and this is the key bit. So he's talking about pact, but that's not what defence union is. It's single point command and control of all the defence and security services in the EU.
And that would be a major giving up of sovereignty, wouldn't it? A major surrender of that sovereignty.
Well, it will, because they will want cardinal values. They'll want capital procurement budgets and operational budgets that will be set from the EU, so they'll control policy. Now, if we look at the detail here, our end, we've got good old James Cartledge on the Tory bench, saying, where's the procurement plan, where's the industrial plan, where's the plans for, defence investment, etc., and they've been stalled for quite some time. Admiral Lord West and I have been calling this out about why there are no orders for frigates and etc. Well, the reason they're delaying the orders is because all the orders for capital procurement will be done through the EU.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah.
And this is the problem with what Starmer is doing at the moment, is the British public don't really understand what this is and what's going on.
And another thing that he's doing that I think a lot of people don't understand in regard to sovereignty, in regard to our power, what he wants, how he wants to operate, are the Chagos Islands and what's happening there. We're going to talk about that in just a minute, actually, with Mark Francois, the Shadow Defence Minister. So, David, I'm sure you'll want to hear that discussion, some major developments on all of that. David, for the moment, thanks for your call. Malcolm in Devon wants to talk about Reform UK and the future of electoral politics. Malcolm, you're very, very welcome to the programme. Tell us your thoughts.
I was just thinking, Peter, earlier the gentleman said obviously we can... Reform can get together with the Conservatives, and I thought, well, it doesn't really matter about the Conservatives. If we need to get together with the Monster Raving Luna Party, let's do it. Let's just get Labour out. Who cares?
Well, listen, the Monster Raving Loony Party's co-leader for some time, in fact, may still be. Alicia, producer, could you perhaps just check this? Actually, the co-leader of the Monster Raving Loony Party was Mandu the Cat. So if Mandu the Cat were to become a government minister, that's something I could get behind, Malcolm, quite frankly.
Well, they've got more respect on my part than what Labour have got.
They've got more respect for the Monster Raving Loony Party than for the Green Party, I can tell you, Malcolm. So you think if Reform UK don't quite get over the line, they should just do this? What about the Conservatives? Should they just do it as well, just to stop a sort of rainbow coalition of Gaza independents, perhaps, Green Party, Labour, Lib Dems, whoever on the left?
Well, I think politically, to save the country and to save us people that are trying to sort of get some sort of stabilisation into what we want and what we know and what we call our country, then possibly, yes, I think they should.
OK, listen, thanks for your thoughts, Malcolm. Really appreciate that. Lots more to come. We're going to be speaking to Mark Francois, the Shadow Defence Minister, in just a second about this Chagos deal. Very sadly, Mandu the Cat no longer with us and no longer co-leader of the Monster Raving Loony Party. Died in 2002, so that shows you how incredibly out of date I am. Palmerston, the cat of the Foreign Office, also very sadly no longer with us, died on Thursday. I've written about it in the Times. It's online at the moment. It's going to be in the paper tomorrow, I'm told. So lots to read there if you want to pick up your super soaraway Times newspaper tomorrow. We're going to be talking to Mark Francois. As I said, we'll take more of your calls, text, tweets and voice notes too. We're going to talk about the Chagos deal. We're also this hour going to talk about Iran. Loads of the media absolutely ignoring the fact that hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets over the weekend. Why? Well, we'll get into that too. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Some breaking news now just coming into the Talk newsroom, and that is that Keir Starmer has abandoned plans to cancel 30 local council elections in May. This is another U-turn. I think the 15th or 16th of this Prime Minister. It's hard to keep up. The government abandoning plans to delay elections to 30 councils across the country. This is that ministers are dropping the planned delays after receiving new legal advice. Well, that's fascinating. This is the government abandoning their bid to delay the local elections to 30 councils in England. Ministers dropping the planned delays after receiving new legal advice. I'm just getting this information in now. Sir Keir Starmer backing down the plans in the face of fury from many, including Nigel Farage. Mark Francois is for the Conservatives and just happens to join us at this exact moment on another story that we'll get into, I promise, in just a second on the Chagos Islands. A real betrayal there, which we'll talk about in a second. But Mark, I hope you don't mind me putting you on the spot and just getting your reaction to this U-turn from the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer.
I don't mind at all. My parrot is over the moon. This is just brilliant news. It was completely undemocratic even to suggest cancelling the local elections, mainly in Labour areas, because they were frightened. So it is a good thing that these elections are going ahead. They should never even have been threatened with cancellation, and we are up for a fight. So it's great that people in these areas will have a chance to vote, particularly when you've got controversial issues like local government reorganisation, they will now have a chance, peacefully and democratically, to pass their verdict on Labour's local councillors and this rotten Labour government. And I am beyond chuffed.
I mean, Labour's argument, sorry, just one more question, I promise we'll get to the Chagos Islands,
Yeah.
but just one more aspect of this. Labour's entire argument was there is complicated local government reorganisation, therefore this has to happen. But now they're changing their view, it would appear. I'm just getting brief details of this. As soon as I get all of them, of course, you'll have them. As soon as I know, you'll know, to our viewers and listeners, and to Mark as well. But this is apparently in light of recent legal advice. And yet again, it shows, you know, this comes in with another story about the £500,000 phone compensation for migrants. They were told they couldn't do that, could have breached their human rights. You have an army of lawyers. You know this, Mark. You've been in government. You have an army of lawyers in government. If something's going to be illegal, surely there's someone saying, hold on a second, Prime Minister, this is illegal.
Well, we'll come on to Chagos in a minute.
Yeah.
But look, this is it was always utter nonsense. Let me try and put it like this, Peter. In July 1945, we had a general election in Britain, even though we were still involved in fighting the tail end of the Second World War in the Far East. So we managed to have a general election in wartime, but Labour was suggesting we couldn't have local elections in peacetime. The whole argument was clearly always utterly ridiculous. And I think they were looking at a court case in the next few days, and clearly someone with some common sense has said at the last moment, this is completely indefensible. We may as well give in before we lose.
Just to say to our viewers and listeners, that is the breaking news that Starmer has U-turned again, this time on cancelling local elections. All 30 of them that have been cancelled will go ahead in May. When I get more information on that, I will absolutely bring it to you. In fact, I have a little bit more. This is the local government secretary, Steve Reid, decided to withdraw his decision to postpone the elections due to take place in May in light of recent legal advice, according to a letter from the government legal department, which has been shared by Nigel Farage. We are actually speaking to a Reform UK politician, Leila Cunningham, in just a few minutes' time. But Mark, as promised, and the reason we have you on the programme is to talk about the Chagos Islands. This is a little bit complicated, so I'm going to shut up and let you explain it to me and to our viewers and listeners how there is actually provision that the Chagos Islands and Diego Garcia shouldn't have been given away in the first place, and the fact that there is a legal agreement and there could well be an invocation of an international agreement which meant that it shouldn't have happened in the first place, and that Parliament was potentially lied to. Go ahead, Mark.
Right, but I'll give it a go. You're right, it does get legally fiddly. But the bottom line is, the government's argument has always been that we need to pay £35 billion to Mauritius.
Oh, Mark, are you there? Have we lost sound on Mark? Oh, we seem to have lost the line to Mark Francois, unfortunately, there. We'll try and get it back because I do want to hear that. This is a very important story, actually, about the Chagos Islands and what's happening there. We'll see if we can get Mark Francois back, even on the phone, to talk to him in just a second. But we'll talk to you, perhaps, in the meantime. More information coming through now on that plan about ministers abandoning the plan to delay local elections. This is the breaking news in the last few minutes, that the government abandoning its bid to delay the local elections to 30 councils in England. The local government secretary, Steve Reid, decided to withdraw his decision to postpone the elections due to take place in May in light of the recent legal advice. This is according to a letter from the government legal department, which has been shared by Nigel Farage. We will bring you more on that. Farage says, we took this Labour government to court and won in collusion with the Tories. Keir Starmer tried to stop 4.6 million people voting on May the 7th. Only Reform UK fights for democracy, in Nigel Farage's view. Mark in Lincolnshire. Sorry, do we have Mark Francois? We don't? No, we're trying to get back Mark Francois at the moment. Yeah, we're trying to get him back on the phone. As soon as we have him back, we will bring him to you, I promise. But let me just give you more detail here on what Nigel Farage is saying. This was a 2-day High Court hearing that was due to start on Thursday, but the government will now seek to agree an order with Reform UK to end its case, and the government will agree to pay the claimant's cost of these proceedings. Now, Nigel Farage has written on Twitter, I think there's some problems with Twitter being down at the moment, actually, but I'll just look up exactly what Nigel Farage has been saying here on his Twitter. Yep, we took the Labour government to court and won, says Nigel Farage. In collusion with the Tories, he says, Keir Starmer tried to stop 4.6 million people voting on May the 7th. Only Reform UK fights for democracy. And he has tweeted tweeted a letter from the Treasury, someone for the Treasury solicitor, apparently saying that the Secretary of State that Steve Reid, for Labour Cabinet Minister, is the local government secretary, the Secretary of State has decided to withdraw his decision to postpone the council elections of 30 local councils due to take place in May 2026 in light of recent legal advice for the avoidance of doubt no privilege is waived. The Secretary of State invited the Housing Minister, who was not involved in the initial decision making, to reconsider the position afresh on a very urgent basis, recognising the pressing timescales involved. The Housing Minister has decided that the elections should proceed in May 2026. The Secretary of State will seek to agree an order with the claimant in light of this announcement, disposing of the claim, and will agree to pay the claimant's costs in these proceedings. So Reform UK, in fact, I was speaking to someone quite senior in Reform UK recently about this, who was talking about it. So that is a serious victory for Reform UK, and it means that those local elections will be held on the 30th. The 30 different areas will be held on the 7th of May, as well as, of course, the local elections, not just local elections in England, but the national elections in Scotland for the Scottish Parliament and the Welsh Assembly. Mark in Lincolnshire has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Mark, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say today?
Hi there, Peter. Yeah, I mean, that was good news hearing that, by the way.
Sorry, say that again, Mark. I just missed that.
That was good news hearing that about the election.
Yeah, I agree.
I wouldn't necessarily blow it all up in Farage, to be honest.
They brought the legal action, Mark.
Yeah, he brought the legal action. Fine, fair enough. You know, let's give them the win. They've done the right thing in the end anyway, so that's the main thing.
What do you think about Reform UK perhaps doing a deal with the Conservatives?
I think it makes sense. It would make perfect common sense, because realistically, if you actually look at where they sit policy position-wise at the moment, they're very, very closely aligned, really. You know, the ECHR thing, what they're saying about illegal immigrants, this kind of stuff, it's very closely together. I mean, you know, you're talking cigarette paper between the two of them, to be fair.
So you think Reform UK and the Conservatives are essentially singing from the same hymn sheet, and they're very similar parties, you think?
I think they're exactly the same, pretty much. I mean, there's very little difference. I mean, when you look at Reform, yeah, they've taken in the likes of Jenrick and what have you, and Zahawi and whatnot. But when you actually look at it at the bigger picture, they've taken well over 100 Tories into their party in various positions. You know, I
think in terms of people, I think in terms of MPs or former MPs, we're only talking about 25 or so. But Mark, it's a very interesting point, and thank you for making it. I just have to go back to Mark Francois now. He's waiting patiently now. We've established the communications again. Sorry about that, Mark. Clearly some gremlins in the system there. On Chagos, just explain this to us.
Yeah, sorry, the Chinese jamming these days is obviously getting worse, Peter. Look, so the government's argument's been we've got to spend £35 billion of British taxpayers' money in order to lease back some islands that belong to us in the first place, because if we don't, we could lose a court case on it. That is the government's argument in a nutshell. And it's not true. They said, firstly, they kept changing the story about what the legal threat is. Firstly, they said we could lose in the International Court of Justice. Well, we have a clear opt-out for any disputes in the ICJ that affect former or current Commonwealth countries. So straight away that falls. Then they said we could lose in the International Telecommunications Union, which is the UN agency. But we've got an opt-out on that under Article 48 of the ITU Constitution. So their last line of defence was the United Nations Commission on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS. And again, there's a UN tribunal called ITLOS, the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea, that oversees disputes. So this is their, as it were, their final argument. Now, Article 298B, sorry to be so legalistic, but we are talking treaty law here, says we, member states of UNCLOS, which we are, have an opt-out on any dispute which relates, and I quote from the article, disputes concerning military activities, including military activities by government vessels and aircraft engaged in non-commercial service. So in pub English, we've got a copper-bottomed, legally watertight opt-out. So even if someone, Mauritius or anyone else, took a case to the ITLOS tribunal, we just cite Article 298B and say these are military activities on the strategic base of Diego Garcia. You have no authority to rule, and that is the end of it.
And that is the end of it, Mark. That is the end of it, because it's really straightforward. There is no legal basis. There was never going to be a legal challenge, and if there was, we could opt out of it. So let's see let's think about what happens now, because this is in the latter stages of becoming law, essentially. It's going through Parliament at the moment. The treaty's been signed. The Americans are involved. So we're in a situation where the Chagos Islands are going to be given to Mauritius. Could there be, I mean, in theory, that could all be withdrawn. It should be, but realistically, it's probably not going to be. So what happens now?
Well, it should be. Now, the bill is stuck in the Lords because the Lords have realised that this is the case. Now, you know, just I should say in my own defence, you know, I've raised this issue directly with defence ministers, with Luke Pollard, during the second reading debate of that bill in the Commons. So did other MPs like IDS and Jeremy Wright. And Pollard refused to answer the question. He just wouldn't answer it, despite repeatedly being asked it. And then we provoked an Opposition Day debate. That's where we can choose the motion a few weeks ago on Diego Garcia. And my boss, James Carl, is the Shadow Defence Minister, asked exactly the same direct question to Luke Pollard, a Defence Minister. And what he did was he started yelling at my boss, trying to create a diversion, trying not to answer the question. In May last year, when Healy, the Defence Secretary, Pollard's boss, brought the treaty to the House of Commons, he said the legal threat, the ultimate legal threat, was the UNCLOS.
That is absolutely correct.
Tribunal.
That is correct.
Yeah, right. So what I'm saying is, in effect, Labour ministers have misled the House of Commons by an act of omission rather than commission. They know what the answer is. They won't give it at the dispatch box. So all they do is bluster and try and avoid the question. That is, in effect, misleading the House.
Why do you think it is that Mr. Rules, Mr. International Law, Mr. Let's give $6.5 to people who've had their phones taken away from them because the High Court says so and because it's the European Convention on Human Rights. International law trumps everything else. It's really, really important. This is Keir Starmer, who is saying that, you know, as someone who was a human rights lawyer, this is all really important, the rule of law. You have found, through great work that has been done by you and other people, a really clear, straightforward basis on which this doesn't have to happen. We do not have to give the Chagos Islands away. It doesn't have to happen. You've just outlined there really straightforwardly, there is a legal provision, which means we don't have to do it. Why do you think Keir Starmer actually wants to do it? And why do you think the likelihood is, I hope it doesn't happen, but let's be realistic here, Mark, he's probably going to ignore you.
Well, he doesn't have a majority in the Lords. You know, the bill is still stuck in the Lords. Now that all of this has come to light, I very much hope the Lords will dig their heels in and not let him get away with it. Why are they doing this? Because they are human rights fanatics. The Prime Minister, his Attorney General, and of course Philippe Sands, KC, a very long-standing friend of the Prime Minister, who has represented the Mauritian government in London for over a decade. All of these people think similarly. They believe that human rights they transcend any other consideration.
But what about, I mean, we're told that about their thoughts on international law as well. I mean, there's a question for them rather than for you, Mark, but you would imagine international law and international treaties would be forefront in his mind, especially when it's pointed out to him that this is nonsense. We do not have to give the Chagos Islands away.
Well, if you look at the actual agreement between us and the Mauritian government, on page 1 of the agreement, it talks about decolonisation as one of the reasons for doing it. So in the mind of these people who seem to be ashamed of our colonial past, this is all part of trying to atone for that. And therefore they interpret these agreements in the way that they want. And Philippe Sands obviously comes up with an argument to facilitate that interpretation. So look, right at the heart of it is they're prepared to pay £35 billion of taxpayers' money to Mauritius to salve their consciences about post-colonial guilt. And it's absolute bonkers.
Mark, thank you for that. Mark Francois there, the Shadow Defence Minister. Lots in that. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss, including something so much of the media is completely ignoring, which is the hundreds of thousands of people right across the world, 250,000 of them in Munich alone over the Munich Security Conference, who are protesting about Iran. This is a story we need to talk about because it affects us here in the UK and so many people completely ignoring it. Stay with us here on Talk. We will not ignore it.
You said that he's going to cover Manchester.
Most of Manchester. He's covering most of Manchester.
No, he's going to build solar farms big enough to cover Manchester.
That's what I said.
It's not going to cover Manchester.
Why does it say it in the Telegraph then?
Oh, my God.
It says it in black and white.
Samara, do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying. I do understand what Ash is saying too, though.
Because
do you think he's going to cover Manchester?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you, everybody who's been in touch. I've just been looking at some tweets and messages there over the break. Jude says, thanks for highlighting the awful incident with Matt Lucas. Matt has never made his views clear. Why should he? But hey-ho, it's open season on us Jews, isn't it? We all feel sick. Angela says, I don't care who Reform UK coalition with before or after. I just don't want a far-left anti-Semitic government, says Angela. Coalition with, I didn't see it as a verb, but maybe now it is. A brilliant tweet sent to me by a friend over the weekend talking about blizzardly conditions and the weather as well. I want to talk about something else that happened over the weekend, actually, the Munich Security Conference, and the fact that there were 250,000 protesters there in favour of the Iranian people, many of whom are risking their liberty, their freedom, not such as they have it, to protest the horrendous Iranian regime. And my question is, where are all these people on the pro-Palestinian marches saying, we care about women's rights, we care about human rights, we care about freedom, we care about humanitarian causes? Where are they when it comes to Iran? The answer is absolutely nowhere. Well, Nyak Gorbani is an anti-regime Iranian journalist and is with me now. Nyak, thank you very much for joining me today. Can you just tell me your impressions of what these protests right across the world, particularly in Munich, some of them here in London as well. In fact, I was talking to a couple of people on the train in London, just standing waiting for the train on Saturday, and there's a woman actually quite emotional talking to me about how these horrendous thousands of people killed in Iran, thousands of people who are being repressed by the regime. The story isn't going away. Tell me your thoughts, Nyak.
Hi, thank you for having me, and thank you for being on our protest last Saturday. And I want to invite you again on 22nd of February, which is we will be front of number 10, asking for British people safety and supporting Iranian people. Yeah, as you said, lots of people, more than 250,000 people just gathering in Munich. I want to remind you, 1980, German West government refused to let Crown Prince enter to Germany just because of the pressure on the Islamic Republic, put the pressure on the German government. And I really welcome this plan. And we have right now all patriots around the world behind us, and I'm really glad of that. We Iranians appreciated that, especially in UK. We have lots of British patriots. We need more British patriots.
Just tell us, Nyak, and what's happening in Iran with your friends and family, things that you hear from people there. How are people being repressed to this day? Because so much of the media has forgotten this story. They're not covering it in the way they should be. Just tell me what's happening right now from what you have been reading, hearing, seeing, and people you've been speaking to.
Yeah, I think actually 2 days Crown Prince announced for Iranian people gathering in Iran, coming in the street and chanting for freedom, and Islamic Republic actually brutally attacked them and start killing them in just one night. 2 nights actually, more than 12,000 people get killed, and in actually all the time we get more and more and more. Right now we actually, the Iranians say more than 80,000 people get killed, and we are just around the world. We want to show the Iranian people support.
It's very hard to verify those numbers, of course, but we do know that many people in Iran have been killed by the regime. We know that people are taking huge risks as well. What do you think, as well as the protests you mentioned that you were on and have been organising, what is it that people here in the UK can actually do to put pressure on our government to do more about the Iranian regime?
Our request is really simple. We want to actually shut down embassies around the world, Islamic Republic embassies, which is the base of terror and base of threatening Iranians and British, our supporters. They are a risk of British values, risk of British safety, the Islamic Republic. We are actually asking to kick all the politicians who are acting in favor of the Islamic Republic from UK. We want to asking government prescribe IRGC as a terrorist organization, which is our responsible for the killing the Iranian people. And we're asking the government recognize our revolution, Lion Sun revolution, and our leader, Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, as a leader of this movement.
Okay. Listen, thank you for your thoughts on that. That's Nyak Gorbani, an anti-regime Iranian journalist. I wouldn't want to create the impression falsely that I was on that march. I would very happily join it, and I totally agree with the fact that we need to support the Iranian people. But just to be absolutely clear, just because I would just want to be as honest and straightforward with you as possible, I was just talking to a woman who'd been on two people actually, who'd been on the march on Saturday. I was just coming home from my show. The march had been that morning. I'd been presenting, was it Saturday or Sunday? I think it was Saturday. I'd been presenting on this station, of course, so I wasn't actually on that particular march. But listen, I totally have sympathy and my thoughts, and I think we need to do so much more as a country in regard to that issue. But Nyak assumed I was on the march. Just want to be absolutely clear and clarify that. Let's talk to Robin in London, who's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000 about these deals, these political deals, and what Reform UK could do. We're going to talk to Reform UK's candidate for London, Leila Cunningham, in just a few minutes' time. Robin, your thoughts on this? You're very welcome to the programme.
Hi, Peter. Thanks for taking my call. I don't think I've spoken to you, or I've phone talk.
Well, it's great to chat to you, Robin.
Lots of people are saying about whether Reform will do a deal with the Conservative Party and vice versa. But people haven't sat down and thought about the makeup of the Conservative Party that might be there after the election. Now, it's full of a lot of what people have termed in the past wets, who might not necessarily agree with how Reform would like to manage the country.
Yep.
And Kemi Badenoch, yeah, she's singing the same songs as many of the Reform supporters, but there's certainly people within the Conservative Party who aren't.
You're absolutely right. Every party is a coalition, and there are a lot of people, the sort of One Nation crowd, the Wets, who would run a mile from Reform UK.
So if they end up winning more seats in the Conservative Party after the general election, they might turn around and say, we're not doing a deal with Reform. We're going to do a rainbow coalition with everyone else.
Although, Robin, first of all, every single thing you've said is absolutely correct, Robin. But the point is as well that, you know, you look at the Liberal Democrats, for example, they were very much against what many of the Conservatives wanted between 2010 and 2015, but they came up with a coalition agreement. Two political parties which thought different things came up with an agreement of things they could agree on. That's not out of the question, is it?
It's not out of the question, but look what happened during the coalition years. The Conservatives became much more Liberal Democrat than the Liberal Democrats became Conservative, if that makes sense.
I think a lot of people would agree with that, but certainly it's a really, really interesting point, Robin. Do you want it? Do you want it to happen, or do you want Reform UK to be a majority government, or what would your dream be?
I'm one of the Conservatives that left the Conservative Party and joined Reform. So I personally think the country needs a very strong government. And that means that if Nigel can get in as a majority with a healthy majority, I don't mean sort of like the same as Keir Starmer's, but a healthy majority,
yes,
and be able to say, this is the direction we're going and this is the direction we're taking, and they take the country with them, because I think we've got one chance.
Well, we're crying out for leadership, Robin. Robin, I've got to go to the news, but I just want to say, please ring me anytime, because I really enjoyed that conversation. A lot of common sense in that from Robin in London there, so thank you to him for that. We're going to talk to Leila Cunningham in just a second, the mayoral candidate for Reform UK for London. I wonder what she makes of this U-turn from the government after Reform UK's legal action.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, it's just gone 3 o'clock. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell, and the big news today is that Reform UK have forced the government into a massive U-turn on the local elections. There were 30 different areas where the local elections were not due to happen, had been cancelled, postponed, whatever you want to call it, for 2 years, up to 2 years. Now, legal advice given to the government has meant that Keir Starmer has U-turned again. This is the 15th or 16th U-turn. I've lost count. I don't know about you. We'll be speaking to Reform UK's mayoral candidate for London, Leila Cunningham, in just a minute to see what she thinks. There was a legal dispute. A High Court action was going to happen on Thursday. Instead, the government, Keir Starmer and Steve Reid, the local government secretary, have capitulated, caved in, U-turned to Reform UK. Lots to discuss on all of that. There are other political matters I want to discuss with Leila as well. We'll get into all of that, particularly on the fact that £500,000 has been given to as compensation to migrants. That is the front page of the Sun newspaper today. We're also talking about homeless veterans and what Leila Cunningham has been saying about that. Loads of people of our viewers and listeners care about veterans. Many of them are veterans themselves or military families, and homeless veterans are a really, really big issue. We'll talk about Starmer and not him specifically, but a pro-Labour group smearing journalists and whether Starmer should be looking into that. He says there's a Cabinet Office probe into that, and whether Reform UK will have a coalition or perhaps some sort of electoral pact with the Conservatives. We'll talk about child online safety a little bit later on, about whether children will be banned from using chatbots and the social media ban. Jim Gamble, the former chief executive of the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre, will talk to us about that. Lots more to come on workers' rights as well, with reforms pushing a third of employers to cut hiring. Whatever you want to talk about today, whether it is these activist judge, whether it is Nigel Farage, whether it's Russian spy allegations, whether it's the Chagos deal that Mark Francois was talking about a little bit earlier on. Lots more to discuss on all of that. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Get your voice on the air between now and 4 o'clock. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note less than a minute, please. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. Let's get going here on Talk. Right then, the big news breaking within the last 40 minutes is that the government has U-turned. This was thanks to legal action brought by Reform UK, some very clever people behind the scenes with legal brains in Reform UK, putting forward all their legal brain power to make this High Court action against the government, which was going to postpone or cancel 30 elections. We spoke about earlier on to one of the candidates. Leila Cunningham is Reform UK's mayoral candidate in London. This won't affect her personally, but Leila, a major victory for Reform UK. You got a smile on your face?
Yeah, of course. You know, I mean, we've forced the government to retreat. And listen, we forced the government to set a dangerous precedent that ministers can delay elections. And it exactly shows why reform matters. We're the only ones that are really properly seriously challenging the government. And don't forget, it was Conservative councils also that wanted to cancel elections. It wasn't only Labour.
You have 10 or 11, I think it's 11 councils that are under Reform UK control now. There were many other councils, of course, that this is affecting. I just wonder, I mean, the government said that the reorganisation of local government was the reason that they were postponing the elections. What happens with that now?
Well, I mean, listen, councils somehow have capacity for diversity strategies, net zero plans, but not for elections. You know, you don't pause democracy for restructuring. You reform institutions after elections, not by cancelling them, in Reform's opinion. And democracy and elections are never optional.
What do you think the government's motivations were? They would argue, of course, it was about the reorganisation of local government. But here we are, their own legal advice saying, you go to court on this and Reform UK are going to beat you.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the legal advice didn't change. The law has not changed in any way. It's obvious that the law never allowed this in the first place, and they only discovers it after Reform took legal action and forced the issue into court. And, you know, I think we have a fundamental principle in this country that elections are not optional. You don't get to extend your term as much as you want. The electorate's the only one that can do that.
One of your main opponents is, of course, Labour. They're in major trouble over the weekend because of these smears against Sunday Times journalists, including the multi-award winning Gabriel Pogrund and the deputy political editor Harry York. I just wonder what your thoughts are on this story, because Starmer has said there'll be a Cabinet Office probe into what happened. But some of the detail in this, £36,000 given by the pro-Starmer Labour Together group. Its former head, Josh Simons, is now an MP. What should happen with that?
I mean, the Labour Party's acting like gangsters. You know, smearing journalists, some of them as foreign agents, I think because they're Jewish.
I mean, it wasn't the Labour Party per se, it was Labour Together, which is a pro-Starmer think tank, but there are very close links, aren't there?
I mean, yeah, you know that think tank is there purely to support the party, and it's, as you said, it's very interlinked. And to suggest that reporters are part of a Russian conspiracy, I mean, it's reckless, and it really chills free speech, because it sends a message that if you're reporting bad things about the government, they're going to come after you. It's basically, it's not, you know, they're fighting scrutiny, basically.
Are you happy to be scrutinised? There are, of course, there have been negative things in the press about you and many of your colleagues in Reform UK from time to time. How do you kind of deal with it? Do you just take it on the chin? Do you fight it? There have been Reform UK politicians who've stopped speaking to certain journalists and cut out various newspapers and so on. What do you think is the correct strategy?
I mean, you say that, but I think you're mentioning just one council. I think Nigel is very, you know, everyone's invited to our press conferences, and Nigel answers questions from a wide range. I think he's answered more questions than any other leader put together. He doesn't shy away from any kind of, scrutiny, because I think scrutiny is important. We have to scrutinise, and we welcome scrutiny because we really have nothing to hide. And listen, a government or a party that's confident in its record doesn't need to intimidate journalists, as Labour have.
Well, let me scrutinise you on one point then. Razia Yousaf, some people say opening the door to a patriotic election pact with the Conservatives. Is that something that you would feel comfortable with?
Listen, I heard what he said. I'm not quite sure that's what he meant. There's a big deal has been made of this story. Number one, I don't think there will be an electoral pact on the left, because I think once Labour associate themselves with the Greens, they've really lost a lot of credibility. Let's not forget who leads the Greens. It's a man who has a different name, who was a Lib Dem, and who used to hypnotise women for larger breasts and take money for really compounding their insecurities.
Okay, I'm sure he would, just to keep us both out of court, I am sure that Zach Polanski would deny compounding people's insecurities through hypnotism, but you're absolutely...
When you hypnotise women for larger breasts, when you know full well that physically that is not possible...
I'm not arguing against that point, Leila.
I think when people know that, his Christmas message was from the border, welcoming illegal migrants. I think people don't actually know how dangerous a Green party in any kind of leadership role is. And I think if the Labour choose to associate themselves with, then it really shows that they're just in it for power and not in it for the best of the country. So I don't think they would be that suicidal as to form a coalition with the left. And listen, Reform is here to implement the radical change that we need as government. And
But how radical can you be when actually you may be in a situation, this is totally hypothetical, but you could hypothetically be in a situation where you need the Conservatives, and actually what's not hypothetical is that you've taken a load of former Conservatives on board. Robert Jenrick, now one of your MPs. In fact, 7 of your 8 MPs have at one stage or the other been either Conservative MPs or members of the Conservative Party or donors to the Conservative Party.
Yeah, because these are the people that recognise that the Conservative Party has betrayed the country and they want to put it right. There's nothing wrong with recognising that you are part of a team that got things wrong. And
we're just slightly struggling with the line there, Leila. We'll try and get you back on the line in just a second. That's Leila Cunningham, who is Reform UK's mayoral candidate in London. Oh, we have you back, Leila. You were cut off in your prime there by the technology. Just finish that point, please. Go ahead, Leila.
Me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Yeah, just make that point again, if you would.
I think it takes courage to be part of a party, leave that party, recognise that you got things wrong and want to make change. And that takes courage, and it takes a certain kind of person to join Reform, and that person always puts the country before the party.
That's a slightly different way of saying what your party colleague in Kent, the leader of Kent County Council, who I had a fascinating interview with a few weeks ago, said expecting someone not to have political views before they join Reform UK, which is a new party, of course, a reasonably new party, is like expecting a woman to be a virgin on her wedding night, which was a particularly interesting and very funny phrase, I thought, what she said on the air. You want to be Reform UK's first London mayor. Tell us about your plan to put homeless veterans before asylum seekers. What is the plan here?
Well, there is already legislation that says that you should prioritise veterans for social housing, but that's not happening in London. We have refugees are put to the top of the list in certain councils. In fact, 15 London councils have declared themselves sanctuary councils for refugees. And for us, that is shameful that newcomers are put to the top of the housing list while the men and women that serve this country with their life are sleeping rough. And so our promise to veterans is that you will be prioritised for social housing, and we will look at community ties and local ties, and those who are from the local community will also go to the top of the list. Because right now, Peter, people don't realise there is legislation in the Equalities Act and two other legislations, I forget the name, where you cannot prioritise British people for social housing because it says that you cannot discriminate on the basis of nationality. And our argument is, of course you must prioritise British people, because if you're not prioritising your own country, where can you be? But there's nothing we can do about that now. Only when a reform government comes will British people finally be prioritised for social housing. What would your stance be on, if you became Mayor of London, on anti-Semitism? Because we know that there was some criticism of Nigel Farage for these historic things. I mean, we're talking 49 years ago, things he may or may not have said. He denies it. We'll set that to one side for the meantime, because it's a straightforward he said, she said argument, unless you want to talk about it, which you can. But the catalyst for my question is that Matt Lucas, the comedian and performer, was heckled by someone. He, to my knowledge, has never expressed a view on the Middle East or said anything public about any type of specifically Middle Eastern political issue, yet he was heckled on the tube. I mean, that's straightforwardly harassment. What do you think the Mayor of London should do? What would you as Mayor of London do? And what do you think that British Transport Police should do too? Well, I think there should be a straight message from the mayor and from the leadership of London that anti-Semitism will not be tolerated. And if there are people who are marching for the death of Jews or the destruction of Israel, they've got to be stopped and prosecuted if necessary. My best friends are Jewish, and they tell me that they won't let their teenage boys walk around with the Star of David. That is not the London I grew up in, and that's not the London I want. And if London doesn't feel safe for Jewish people, then it's not safe for any of us. And I do speak to Jewish communities who feel that they only get the protection they want after a terrorist attack. And they feel that they're always asking for more protection and they're not quite getting the protection they need. So I would ensure that Jews feel safe, and synagogues and centres of worship and schools have the full protection that they need. You're a Muslim yourself, Leila, and I just wonder why it is that you think that more, I mean, you've spoken out very, very clearly on that, no ambiguity in what you're saying. There's so many people who say, where are all these, moderate, straightforward Muslims, people contributing to the country like you're standing for office. I admire that in anybody from any party. Why is it, do you think, that there aren't more people who come out and call this stuff out? Maybe people just want a quiet life. They just want to put their head down, get on with it, and not be attacked. I mean, listen, I've been called all kinds of stuff by all sides. But for me, it's important that people recognise that my religion that I prescribe to, it doesn't ask you to cover your face. It doesn't. There's no relation to radical Islam that you've been seeing flourish in this country. And it's, I want to show a different side to Muslims, British Muslims. And listen, I don't want to be known as a British Muslim. I just want to be known as British. Yeah, exactly. If someone asked me, it's not about that. Someone asked me the other day, did you suffer racism because you were Muslim when you were young? And I said, you know what, frankly, no one cared. No one knew I was Muslim, not because I hid it, but no one asked. It was just, you took people at face value, not what religion they were, where they were from. And yeah, and wouldn't it be great if we could have a society like that, where we just judge people? Go back to that. Yes, where it's based on law and merit. Thank you, Leila. We're just struggling with the line again, but we'll leave it there. But that's Leila Cunningham there, who is the mayoral candidate for London for
Reform UK. There was a great man who once said that he wanted his 4 children to be evaluated and judged by not the colour of their skin but the content of their character. His name was Martin Luther King. We'll take some views from you on all of these things, including the local elections being back on after the government has capitulated to Reform UK. Lots more to discuss after the break. Stay with us.
You said that he's going to cover Manchester.
Most of Manchester. He's covering most of Manchester.
No, he's going to build solar farms big enough to cover Manchester.
That's what I said.
It's not going to cover Manchester.
Why does it say it in the Telegraph then?
Oh, my God.
It says it in black and white.
Samara, do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying. I do understand what Ash is saying too, though.
Because
it rains. Do you think he's going to cover Manchester?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you very much indeed to everybody who's been in touch. Just been having a look at some of the tweets over the break there. And Lawrence says, yet another stonking good show, says Lawrence, much appreciated. Regarding compensation payments to illegal immigrants in respect of their phones being confiscated, it's not just the £500,000 in court award fees, it's also the matter of the massive legal aid fees, which are also going to be paid by the taxpayer. Well, one thing that has happened, well, in fact, it has been kept out of court, is the government actually taking the advice of the government lawyers in regard to cancelling those local elections, because guess what? They're not supposed to do that. Denying democracy isn't a good idea or anything that should happen at all. That's something that Philip in Somerset wants to talk about. Philip, what are your thoughts on this today? Thanks for the call.
Good afternoon, Peter. A great show as usual.
Thank you.
It's just regarding Mr. Farage, and you said about a strong leader earlier on, and I was driving along thinking about, well, look what he did in Brexit, look what he did in being debanked, and now look what he's done with the reinstatement of the elections. And I'm trying to think of another leader of a party that's actually done anything like that in the past. And you may correct me, there may be one, but I couldn't think of one.
It's certainly standing up to this government. Another U-turn by Keir Starmer. I mean, they said they had this ludicrous excuse that the reorganisation of local government couldn't happen, and that's why these elections were postponed. And we had originally many elections being postponed 1 year. We know that local elections usually happen every May. But then when it got to 2 years, and then they couldn't guarantee this, that, and now they finally listened to their own lawyers. So it just seems to be, well done Reform UK for standing up for democracy on this occasion. What I'm worried about is, you know, this costs a huge amount of money. This is the government who, you and I can see, Philip, I'm not a lawyer, I don't know about you, but I could have seen that there were clearly going to be legal issues with that. Why can't the government see this stuff? Why can't they work this stuff out?
I don't think they can work anything out, Peter. I think the general public, and I deal a lot with the general public, and there's a lot of silent voters out there where polls wouldn't show them, but there's going to be a lot of Reform voters, and I don't think they need to make any pact or coalition with the Conservative Party. I think as it gets closer to time and Nigel's doing what he's doing, then I think they're going to be on a sure footing to actually win. What the majority is going to be, I don't know.
They may not be, though, Philip, and if you get to a situation where they just need a few extra people, otherwise it's a Labour and Green or whoever else coalition, could you stomach it? Could you get on with it?
Not really, no. But if we have to, and that's the way Nigel goes, then okay. But I think for a strong leader, I don't think there's anybody out there that's much stronger than Nigel.
Okay, thanks for your thoughts, Philip. Much appreciated. Philip there in Somerset, give me a ring on 0344 1000. That's the number. Robert in Tower Bridge has is it Tower Bridge or Stourbridge, Robert?
Stourbridge.
Stourbridge. I thought so. Yes, someone's written that down incorrectly. If it was Tower Bridge, you'd just be up there. You'd be a few. I can see. I'm looking out the window. I can see Tower Bridge from here. Robert in Stourbridge, which I can't see you, Robert. I'm sorry about that, but it's good to hear you nonetheless. What do you think about this?
I think that even the talk about coalitions is completely wrong. The Conservatives were in power for 14 years and they were thrown out. And that's why we got this pathetic Labour government. Right now, we have got polls saying Reform are 10 points or more ahead. And we're projected to have a majority in Parliament.
It's 3 years away, Robert, and you know as well as I do that those polls have narrowed a little bit. Could you just you know, grit your teeth and get through it if the Conservatives were part of some sort of pact or coalition? Do you think it would be good for the country?
I fully appreciate what you're saying, and in fact Nowcast polls are showing a minority government with the Reform, and I do understand to get a few people on side and we have a Reform government. I can understand that. Mm-hmm. But not right at this moment. The Tories were rejected. So why are we even thinking about having a coalition with Conservatives? I don't even want to have another declaration of another defection from the Tory party.
Are those defections diluting the Reform brand, do you think, Robert?
I can understand Nigel Farage saying let's use the word repent. They've repented of their ways, and they're saying yes, okay, we made a mistake, and I can understand that, but we don't. And I'm not saying I'm not saying don't have defections, because I'm quite happy to have a Labour defection as well, when that's meant to be coming up soon.
Yeah, it hasn't happened yet, but yeah.
So I'm very happy to have defections, so long as we have a strong leadership from Reform saying this is the way we're going. And if the Tory party want to come on board and go under this Tory, not Tory party, the people defect and say we are under the leadership of Nigel, under Reform, fine.
Okay.
I don't want any discussion of coalitions just now. I'm a paid-up member of Reform, and I do not want to have Tory party
influence, perhaps. Yeah.
No, absolutely not.
Okay, listen, thank you very much indeed, Robert, in Starbridge rather than Tarbridge. He's not out the window, he's in West Yorkshire. Alan is been in touch, and yes, he's absolutely in Starbridge. Alan is in Yorkshire as well, so a different part of Yorkshire, and he wants to talk about Iran. He says, have we forgotten the English couple who remain in prison in Iran? British couple arrested in Iran on unspecified security charges, identified as Craig and Lindsay Foreman, husband and wife, who were midway through a round-the-world motorbike ride. Why is our government doing nothing to free them? Alan, I should know more about this, and I don't. I'm going to look into that after the show and make sure that I educate myself on Craig and Lindsay Foreman. Thank you for that. David in Leicestershire says, fascinating insight by Mark Francois just now. Clearly there is no basis for this disgraceful Chagos deal, so why is it happening? I think Mark is being too generous when he says Starmer and crew are just human rights fanatics. I sense yet more corruption from Labour. Follow the money and all will come out. Great show, all the best, says David in Leicestershire. Well, thank you for that. Let's talk about what Richard in North London wants to talk about. I believe you have some thoughts on what Kemi Badenoch should do. Richard, what do you think? You're very welcome to the programme.
Hi, Peter. Good to talk to you again. I just think, this Labour government, well, if they had a headline policy, one of them would be that they're going to cancel elections, but it's more with them, it's more like sort of headline edicts, really, because basically they don't have any policies. It's really about edicts and things they're against. But this really is the last straw. This is absolutely ridiculous, because the reality is, if we're now being told that we've got to stage elections that everybody was told were going to be cancelled for at least 6 months.
Yeah, for quite a number of months, and now that U-turn has happened, yeah, just about an hour ago, yeah.
And I just think Kemi Badenoch has got an opportunity here to propose a vote of no confidence, and of course Labour can choose to back Starmer.
She's not going to win that vote of no confidence, though, is she?
No, Peter. But I think sometimes you've got to draw a line in the sand, and actually it forces Labour to back Starmer. It forces those Labour MPs to think, well, look, we're only supporting him because
I know where you're going with this, Richard, but why would she do it knowing she's going to lose it? She would look very silly when it happens, would she not?
No, I don't think she would, because if you add that to the, it's really a stratagem, Peter, because if she does that, it puts him under pressure. We're now 2 or 3 months away from these elections. Labour have had no ability to prepare for elections. They'll be doing even worse in May. Yeah. And come May, it's really about forcing this Prime Minister out of office now.
Okay, well, we'll see if that happens, Richard. Sorry, Richard, you had another point to make there. Didn't want to cut you off there.
No, I just think it's almost a question of going through the. It's more than going through the motions, Peter. It's really about just drawing a line in the sand to say this is the most incompetent Prime Minister we have seen probably ever, because we've never seen so many U-turns. He's not been in 18 months.
On another one today, nearly a U-turn a month, actually, if you tot them all up. Richard, thank you. That's Richard in North London there. We're going to be talking in a second about something else the government is talking about, a social media ban for under 16s. And should children be banned from using chatbots? This is the proposal in a major online safety shake-up. We'll get the views of Jim Gamble. He really knows what he's talking about on this. He's a former senior police officer and was also the chief executive of the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre. Jim Gamble coming up in just a second. Stay with us.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
We've just been having an argument behind the scenes here about whether the West Midlands is a county. I'm told it is. The West Midlands is a county. I did not know that. My English geography is dreadful, but I thought the West Midlands was just like quite a large area. It is a ceremonial county, apparently, and that is where Starbridge is. Just to be clear, the caller is in Starbridge, not Tarbridge. So he is in the West Midlands and not out the window. Right then. Jim Campbell is joining us in now because he is the former Chief Executive of the Child Protection and Online Protection Centre, a former police officer as well. Lots around on a social media ban for under 16s. Could be enforced this year. It's the front page of The Times today. Also, whether children will be banned from using chatbots in a major online safety shake-up is something that's being debated. Jim, you're very welcome to the programme. Thanks for coming back on. I just wonder whether you think this should happen this year, whether it's a good idea, whether what's happened, for example, in Australia in regard to a social media ban is actually working. What's your take on this, Jim?
Well, I don't think it's a good idea to start with, Peter. I think at the end of the day, we need to educate and empower our children and young people. AI is taking over so many aspects of human life now, and future careers, that we need our children to be engaged and empowered by the use of technology, not delayed in embracing the benefits of it. So, of course, we want children to be safer, but the government needs to stop going with this whack-a-mole approach to, here's a problem today, let's create a law. They said that they were going to prevent young people from accessing adult pornography. So they introduced the ban through the Online Safety Act, enforced through age verification. But what happened? The access to Pornhub went down by 200%, but the use of virtual private networks to hide where you are went up by 1,800%. So they've got to think about the known consequence and the unintended consequence. So I still think they are trying to use old laws to deal with a new situation. And as I've said to you before, Peter, they need to be much more agile. If you want to influence these companies to make our children safer, kick them in the wallet, not after a child has been harmed or hurt, but beforehand to make them moderate their own environment so that it's safer. And that goes for whether it's a chatbot, whether it's a social media site. And the irony, Peter, in Australia is this. They say they've banned social media sites. Well, they've not banned WhatsApp. So an encrypted environment where you have group chats that no moderator can see. They've not banned the internet. So what are you going to do? It's like the person who puts the burglar alarm on their house, in days gone by, that simply deflects from their house to the next door neighbour. So ultimately, it's got to be about how we educate and empower our children, how we force social media companies to prevent their algorithms from tracking down young people under the age of 16 and feeding them stuff they shouldn't be, and how government, begins looking in the mirror as opposed to always pointing the finger, and ask itself questions about why it's not investing in better education, why it's not investing in a greater sense of law enforcement, and why, if 10 people go to court today charged and convicted of downloading child sex abuse material, 8 out of 10 of them will walk free. Every 10 people who are convicted in court in the UK for downloading images, only 2 go to prison and the rest walk free. So we need deterrence-based sentencing.
Like Hugh Edwards. Tell me about the social media companies, from your view. Why is it that they're not being responsible? You're saying, take sanctions against them, and I totally agree with you that is the thing that needs to be done, these multi-billion-pound companies. Why is it, do you think, that they're allowing this absolute dross, these horrible things to be given online through the algorithms to young people? Are they just not in control of it? Do they not care? What is sort of their motivation or lack of motivation in your view, Jim?
Well, I think lots of the trust and safety teams, whether it's in TikTok, across Meta or other platforms, they do care. They generally come from safeguarding backgrounds and they're employed by the company. But technology itself is such a massive beast that it's very difficult to apply strict measures of control. And ultimately, if you look at 90+% of 12-year-olds in the UK get their first phone. From who? Is it a predator that walks up and gives it to them in the street? No, it's mum or dad. that gives it to them after Pester Power. So it's more than just the tech companies. But tech companies, aren't worried about you fining them 10% of their turnover. I mean, if you look at Meta last year made about $162 billion in 2024. In 2025, they're set to make about 195. So it's increased. Why is it increased? It's advertising revenue. So as I've said to you before, if we want to be really smart, if government wants to be really agile, let's make a rule that we grade websites, social media platforms, and others, that you start off with 5 stars. If you've got good moderation, you're reporting, you're making your environment safer, you're responding to the complaints and concerns of parents.
Is that
if
practical,
you don't, you
Jim?
drop down this field.
Is that actually practical with hundreds, millions of websites? Is that a practical thing?
Well, let me give you a practical example. A number of years ago, there was a site called Ask FM. And within that site, there were linked 9 suicides. Now, the site didn't cause those, but vulnerable young people with complex needs were going into that environment where they were being brutalized and bullied by misogynistic and aggressive behavior. So associated with those 9 young people that died. Whenever I went to the site and looked at it, I could see high street banners coming across the top of that particular webpage advertising. And these were really, really day-to-day names. And I actually saw, that Specsavers had advertised. So I tweeted, and the tweet's still out there to Specsavers saying, do you know you're advertising on Ask FM, and do you know it's a site associated with this activity? Within a day, they tweeted back to say we've removed all of our advertising portfolio from them. That's the way you do it. You associate the advertisers. If you're going to be an ethical advertiser, you don't advertise in a space that's being graded to be harmful to children. And if you put those up the same as you do hygiene ratings or hotel ratings and TripAdvisor for stays, you let people judge them. And it's the only way to combat them, because otherwise, we continue playing this whack-a-mole game. And the government, they're interested in doing what the last person said to them. They don't want to listen to anyone who's constructively critical about what they're doing. They don't want to listen to anyone who says, look, the Online Safety Act is really largely a red herring. So they really need, if they're going to take this seriously, to stop doing the rounds on breakfast television saying they're losing patients and they're going to do A, B, C, D, and E. And, because half the time when they get to A, they never get to B or C. So it's time for a more holistic wake-up call.
You mentioned parents there. You mentioned Pester Power and giving phones to 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds, whatever age is given, the phones are given out. What is your advice to those parents? What is your advice in terms of children having a phone? Should they have one? What age should they have one, do you think? How should that be dealt with? Because you can put all the parental controls you want on them, but some stuff can get through.
Well, of course it can, and that's why you've got to have those meaningful conversations with your children. Children aren't going out in their droves to self-harm. A phone can be a lifeline if your child is walking home from school and needs help or gets lost or is in some space or place when they need help. I spoke to a group of young people in a youth council in England not 3 weeks ago and talked about, banning social media, and they say it's a lifeline. That's where a lot of the mental health issues are alleviated. So if you're a parent, you've got to maintain frequent and regular contact. You're from Northern Ireland, the same as me, Peter. Over Internet Safety Day and in the days ahead, we have released the Digital Proficiency Certificate. So every child at every age, the youngest children, we're planting seeds of safety, teaching them about the importance of cybersecurity, getting a good password and how you build it, teaching them about the importance of content, what you see, what you shouldn't, and how to deal with it, about conduct, how they behave online, and about contact, about people who approach them and what they should do and how they should deal with it. And finally, we're also dealing with the 6th C, which is commerce, what to believe and what not to believe. So every child in Northern Ireland at this moment in time has the opportunity to do the equivalent of the old cycling proficiency test so that we can be reassured that they know how to deal with problems. Those tests are there at all levels and all ages, including for parents and teachers. And many schools in England, Scotland, and Wales are participating as well. So there are mechanisms, but it's no good for parents sitting, wringing their hands and worrying. They've got to participate.
Okay.
It's no good for government simply pointing the finger at tech. This is going to take a collaborative approach so that our children aren't disadvantaged by being held back from the benefits of technology because of our fear of addressing the critical issues.
Jim, thank you. As always, great common sense there, spoken by Jim Gamble, the former Chief Executive of the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre. He's a former police officer, senior police officer himself. Just a bit of breaking news. 3 teenagers have been found guilty at Woolwich Crown Court of the manslaughter of Alexander Cashford. The 49-year-old was lured to a beach on the Isle of Sheppey and hit with rocks and a bottle after being called a paedophile. If there's more on that, I will of course bring it to you. But I want to speak to Rob in Derbyshire now, who has some thoughts on social media and these bans. Rob, you're very welcome to the programme. Thanks for giving me a ring on 0344 499 1000. What are your thoughts on what Jim Gamble has just said there?
Well, he just calls them children, and and what's happening with the government at the moment is that they're trying to ban social media to young children under 16, but now they're trying to give them the vote, aren't they?
Yeah, votes at 16, yeah.
Children, they're still children at that point, and they're still children. I mean, I didn't grow up, we, as a young man, we were still immature at 18, 19, but at least we can get to the vote at 18. I just think it's amazing that they want to give children the vote at 16, but then just a day later, they can go and vote.
It's a funny thing, because so much of what successive governments, not just Labour but Conservatives, Lib Dems as well, have done is pushed things up to 18. For example, buying cigarettes went from 16 to 18, but the age of consent has gone down, certainly for gay people. It went down previously for straight people previously. So if you're going to ban social media, I mean, some of that social media might actually inform young people. It's not all bad. Some of it might actually inform young people, and they might actually have a view on politics as a result of seeing something on social media.
Of course, yeah. And what gets me is that they're trying to, like you say, the age of consent. It's the only thing that they can do at 16. That's all they can consent to. They can't go to the bookie. They can't. They can join the armed forces at 16 or 17,
but can't fight.
They can't go to a frontline position. And fight and die for this country. Why on earth do you think they're not responsible enough at 16 or just the day before they become 16 to see social media?
Yeah.
Why are they entitled to a vote? It's just ridiculous.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. That is Rob in Derbyshire there giving me a call. Just a bit more detail on these 2 teenagers who have been found guilty of the manslaughter of a man at a seaside resort after he arranged to meet a 16-year-old girl. A girl and 2 boys who were aged 15 and 16 had been on trial for murder of Alexander Cashford, who was 49, in Laysdown-on-Sea in the Isle of Sheppey in Kent on the 10th of August. The guilty trio cannot be named for legal reasons because of their age. The 16-year-old boy had previously pleaded guilty to a secondary charge of manslaughter. The girl and the 15-year-old boy denied manslaughter. All 3 denied murder. Prosecutors said Mr. Cashford was found lying face down in the mud after being hit with rocks and a bottle. Jurors heard he had given the girl his number on the 8th of August. He had met her at an amusement arcade and had handed her a business card with a name that was not his. Using the alias Sienna, the 3 exchanged messages with Mr. Cashford and arranged to meet him by the sea wall. The older male defendant said he attacked Mr. Cashford because he felt police wouldn't have done anything if they'd reported him for trying to meet up with the girl. Mobile phone footage showed the boy striking Mr. Cashford on the head with a bottle. He accepted he wanted to use it to hurt Mr. Cashford, but said he did not believe it would cause serious injury. So that is 2 teenagers who've been found guilty of the manslaughter of a man at a seaside resort after he arranged to meet a 16-year-old girl. Very sorry affair. Lots to discuss on what is happening in industry and what is happening in our workplaces, because workers' rights reforms have pushed a third of employers to cut hiring. Unsurprisingly, I mean, Rachel Reeves says the Employment Rights Bill will mean that people have better rights, and I'm sure they do, but actually if you're an employer, how difficult is it actually to gain some sort of control over your business, especially when you've been hammered by things like the national insurance rises? Lots to discuss in just a second here on Talk.
You said that he's going to cover Manchester.
Most of Manchester. He's covering most of Manchester.
No, he's going to build solar farms big enough to cover Manchester.
That's what I said.
It's not going to cover Manchester.
Why does it say it in the Telegraph?
Oh, my God.
It says it in black and white.
Samara, do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying. I do understand what Ash is saying too, though.
Because
do you think he's going to cover Manchester?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I want to talk now about a story on the front page of the Times newspaper. This is more than a third of employers set to cut back on hiring because of the government's workers' rights reforms. This is a survey of employers. It's a useful survey, and well done to the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development for doing so. But I think we probably knew this already, because so many of our viewers and listeners are people who are the backbone of this country, the people who work in those small businesses that employ 7 or fewer people. Did you know it's something crazy? It's like 99% of businesses in this country employ 7 or fewer people. And what we know is that if you want to employ a 21-year-old in this country, thanks to what the government has done, what Rachel Reeves has done, it costs you £3,600 in order to do so. Before you start, before that person does one day, because of the national insurance rises. And businesses have been warning that new rules giving enhanced protections to workers will place a further handbrake on job creation after they're hit by this national insurance rise. Now, I don't want to take away workers' rights. You know, unions in this country established something called the weekend, which didn't exist previously. So I want workers to be protected. I want to be protected as a worker, certainly, but I happen to work for a company that treats me very, very well. Kate Palmer is HR Director at Peninsula, which is a global employment law consultancy. Kate, I just wonder, in all of this, where we are, because businesses are now saying, hold on a second, rights are good, but actually too many rights, or rights that actually inhibit people getting jobs in the first place. And if you talk to any young person, I know people who have first-class degrees who are struggling to get jobs at the moment.
Yeah, it's really tricky. You know, you touched on it there. The national insurance increases were an initial barrier for employing people, but now we've got this whole host of employment rights under the Employment Rights Bill that are coming into fruition from February for the next 18 months that all cost money and all give employees rights, which is good and right and fair. But ultimately, they touch the bottom line of businesses, and businesses are really concerned. Many of our clients here at Peninsula are explicitly saying they are really doubling down on recruitment, and they're being much more selective over who they are choosing. Maybe not taking a risk on one of those graduates that you touched on there because they can't afford to take risks. They need experience, qualifications, because it will be tougher to exit an employee if they don't deliver the goods. So it's tough for businesses right now.
So what is actually changing about getting rid of people? Because we're moving to an employment set of rules, it seems to me anyway, where it's becoming more and more difficult to say, actually, you're not good enough at your job, off you go.
The biggest one is coming into fruition in January 2027, albeit it has a retrospective effect, and so it will touch employees starting this year. And that is the fact that currently an employee has to have 2 years qualifying service to claim unfair dismissal. That is changing to a 6-month right. Now, don't get me wrong, Labour's manifesto was for that to be a day one right. So they've reached a compromise, and it is going to be 6 months. But that's tough, you know, to assess. And I mean, I work in business. To assess someone's capability within 6 months is quite hard in a lot of jobs. You know, it's quite a waste of time. So businesses are one, being much pickier about who they let through the door, but secondly, will again double down on probationary periods and whether they exit someone earlier on in employment as opposed to giving them longer. So it could have a counterproductive effect than the intended objective.
What do you think the implications for the economy will be? Because I want happy employers. I want people who want to start businesses. I was just chatting to someone, I had lunch with him, I think it was last week. He employs 16 people. and he was just saying, look, I don't know why I'm doing this anymore. I'm just being hammered with, well, minimum wage doesn't affect him because his people get paid more, but minimum wage, if you're in the nighttime industries, for example, that's something that's gone up, and I'm sure it's good for workers, but it doesn't really cost the government very much. It's more to do with the private sector. You've got these national insurance rises, you've got greater business regulation, you've got the Employment Rights Act, all these different pressures. Do you think that the government really understands how difficult it is to run, particularly a small business, if you've got, you know, one of these businesses that has 7 or fewer people working for them, Kate?
Yeah, well, I go back to your introductory point. Most businesses I work with, and primarily SMEs here at Peninsula, want to be good employees. They want to do a good job. They want fair work. They want to treat people with respect and do the right thing. But I do hear that assertion all too frequently, sadly, that they're saying, it is just too much like hard work. There is too much risk. There's too much red tape, and it's not enabling me to actually run my business and be successful. So sadly, I do think that's a really wide belief out there, particularly with SMEs. You know, we've run our own survey here about the impact the Employment Rights Bill is having on employers, and 62% of the clients that we surveyed said they're terrified, quite frankly, about the new unfair dismissal rules, and particularly rules around statutory sick pay from day one, which is currently a day that you don't get that till you've been off until the 4th day. So that's another cost. So yeah, there is definitely worry, concern, and sadly a bit of an attitude of should I bother? And we certainly don't want that in the world where we want growth in SMEs. And
you know far better than I do, Kate, but I can tell you I've had callers. I had one in particular, one guy who I spoke to, who said, look, I run a pizza restaurant, it's really successful. We were thinking of opening 2 more, £400,000 investment. We were going to make a profit probably in a year or 2. We're just not going to do it anymore because it's too complicated, and that's maybe 10 jobs that now don't exist because of that. Kate, very interesting to talk to you. Kate Palmer there, HR Director at Peninsula, which is a global employment law consultancy. Kate Palmer there. Let's speak to Keith in Huddersfield, who has some thoughts on this extraordinary story about these allegations against journalists. Keith, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good afternoon, Pete. Well, regarding the journalist side of it, I think that there needs to be something done regarding who is putting it out, and if that means arresting politicians, they should arrest them.
Okay, well, I don't think any politicians were actually involved in that. Now, Josh Simons, who we have asked to come on the programme a few times, was head of Labour Together. I don't think anything they did was necessarily illegal, but it was certainly unfair, Keith, by the sound of things. Keith,
earlier on, you were speaking to a Russian spy from Reform Party.
Sorry?
You were talking earlier on about a Russian spy from part of the Reform Party.
Oh, yes, Nathan Gill, who was the leader of Reform UK in Wales, yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, he should be in prison now for the rest of his life.
Well, he is in prison now for 10 years, Keith.
Well, that's not his rest of his life, is it?
Yeah, okay.
Right, the other thing is, yesterday, Yvette Cooper come on the television and criticise Reform for having a Russian spy in their outfit. Right, at the same time, the Labour government stopped 2 spies regarding the China job. Right, they delayed it, so they had to cancel it. So what are they doing? They're criticising Reform Party, and they're doing it themselves.
I think, Keith, I think you might be referring to the trial that collapsed there. I think we're probably just going to leave it there on that one, Keith, because I'm not entirely sure what you're referring to, and I just want to get things right, especially from a legal perspective. Matt's in Cheshire and has some thoughts on Labour. Matt, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, good afternoon, Peter.
Good afternoon, hi.
It's sort of bitter irony, this, really. I rang about Labour were campaigning on Saturday afternoon in my area, all the councillors.
And I'm sure you gave them a warm welcome, Matt. Did you say, just you guys, you just hold on a second, I've just put the kettle on, come on in and have a cup of tea and a slice of cake?
No, I didn't. I spoke to 2 of them. The leader of our council is actually quite nice, and I know them. But I watched them out. We've got a big bay window. I watched them walk up our hill to see how people responded. And basically, they were back down the hill within 15 minutes.
Right.
Which means nobody opened the door to them.
They were getting the cool shoulder.
Then Jonathan Reynolds walked up about 10 minutes later with some of his cronies.
Is he your local MP?
He is, yeah.
Right, okay, yeah.
And he obviously got the cold shoulder as well. And then now we've had a Labour council for 49 years, and the fact that they were campaigning in the middle of February for an election in May just shows how utterly desperate they are.
Okay.
And with what we've just heard in the last 20 minutes about the elections having to go ahead, we should let's just crack open the champagne now.
Well, it's good that democracy will actually happen in May, and that these elections haven't been postponed or cancelled. Matt, thank you. That's Matt in Cheshire there. Kevin, how are you doing? Kevin O'Sullivan?
I'm good, Peter. Yeah.
Kevin's here after the break and after the news with Drive, of course. No doubt you are going to talk about Nigel Farage and his legal victory.
Yeah, and the latest, we calculate that it is the unsweet 16th U-turn by
it's hard to keep
Prime
up.
Minister.
It's nearly one a month. Nearly one a month since he came to power.
What is the point of a leader who is notoriously indecisive anyway, and on the odd occasion he does reach some kind of decision? You can then launch the clock countdown to when he changes that decision.
Keir Starmer's indecision is final.
His indecision is final. He's not the only person I know like that, but he certainly is. And it is getting ridiculous. It is getting ridiculous. And he should have known about this. I mean, as Richard Littlejohn always says about Starmer, the thing you have to know about Keir Starmer is he is a complete and utter lawyer, and he should have known this. So what Nigel Farage and Reform UK have launched this legal action to say that the cancellation or the postponement of these 30 local elections was illegal.